So,
You can sit I just want to sit behind her, I wouldn't sit right in front of you. Sorry. It's okay. Yeah, and just over for the summer. Yeah. Oh, did you just swallow some? Sorry. No, just last year. I just couldn't. No, I meant last. I mean, extension. Oh. Yeah. So, I was
Did everybody get food? Yes. I apologize for being late. Running from meeting to meeting. This is going to be my word. I apologize, but never mind. Just a couple things before we begin. Is there somebody here who is willing to take responsibility for videotaping?
I can try.
Yes, that's the right answer. Okay. You'll just do the PhD crowd.
Okay.
I'll ask the MA group something else.
I'm sure they'll be willing.
Where's Grace? Did she fly away? She did.
Yeah.
She was, hello, Grace. Grace is exhausted from doing the videotaping and everything else, so that would be wonderful. Yes. Okay.
I don't know how, if you need to upload it to, you need to upload the CFAR website or whatever.
You're going to have to talk to Grace. I have no idea,
Right.
so I can't help you at all either. Should you
figure it
fail,
out.
okay, could you help?
Yeah, you know I am very bad at these things.
I know, we're all bad at it. Grace, we're trying to relieve you of the...
yes, please.
And can you give a tutorial to anyone?
Yes.
Okay, so Dane has been forced to volunteer, and should he fail, Tia will do it. Okay. Kate, why don't you come to the table? There you go. Okay. Now, so that was the first before we begin. The second before we begin is, this is the fabulous new book that I have out in my hands. On the Verge of Photography. It is edited by Dan Rubenstein, myself, and a guy named Andy Fisher. The work on it is fabulous. The design was done by Sheena Calvert and Joseph Bissett Marshall, and they did a brilliant design job. And it was edited, copy edited, that is to say, gone tooth by tooth by tooth by hair by comb by Hannah Lamon, who's not here with us in this group today. She was a PhD student of mine at Greenwich. And so I also want to just say thanks to all of you who were involved, Grace, of course, suffered through it. But anyway, so here it is. Ta-da, just pass it around. You've seen it. The next thing I just want to do is there are a couple of people here who weren't here last week. Could we just do a quick whip around? Could you just shut the door? Could we just go around and introduce yourselves and more or less say what your subject is and what has brought you to this insanity of the table? Okay, so that's more or less.
I'm Grace. I'm just going into my second year PhD. My working title is Supernatural Sex, Women, Magic and Mediumship, Building a Field of Fascination in Contemporary Art. And I'm looking at mediumship specifically. I'm interested in how it builds a field of fascination with the viewer and the medium, which can be, or can be not replicated, but can similarly be kind of I use replicated again, can similarly be built within the work of a piece of contemporary art. So I work with installation, film, and photography.
Ectoplasm. I think ectoplasm is very odd, so can you make a comment about ectoplasm?
Yeah, ectoplasm is a kind of substance that's emanated from the body of the medium, which is supposedly...
From the mouth or the nose or the ear?
Yeah,
no
any available orifice.
Oh, any available? I didn't realize there's any available.
Yes.
Okay, well, then it gets just what I thought it was. Okay.
Which is supposedly the spirit of a dead person that is being channeled, and it's classed as a materialisation, so it can be known as ectoplasm or teleplasm, and it has to be connected to the actual physical body to be produced. And I recently studied a photographic archive of images of documentation of women exuding ectoplasm, which was in Manitoba in Canada.
What's teleplasm?
Ecto.
No, using the.
Yeah, it can be classed as ectoplasm or teleplasm. It
Oh, it's
depends
the same
on,
thing,
yeah,
but
it's the
just a
same
different
thing,
name,
but yeah, around Europe it was called different things.
And in other places probably called very different things, but.
Yes.
Okay, Jakob? Or Jacob. I'm used to calling you Jakob now.
Jakob or Jacob. Yeah. I'm just finished my MA, continuing on to do my PhD here. My focus is on, well, my working title. Let's go. Grace started, so I'm going to go the same way, as I don't have a plan. My working title is Palimpsest, another way of materialization. That's the working title. I'm tackling the process of concepts, not process, but I'm tackling the concept material and the relations in between in the modern contemporary art practices. I work mostly with photography, writing, so photography, text, film, installations, recent installations. Yes.
Brilliant.
Well, that was actually not bad.
That wasn't bad. Of course.
I can say
Does
it, I
anybody
can't
have
do
any
it.
question to ask?
Nope.
Sorry.
Not interesting.
Great. I mean, you made it sound like. Well, does everybody know what palimpsest is? We discussed
Yeah.
that last week. Okay, good. So we're all fine about that. Okay. That's right.
I love the gesture.
That's right.
Chat video.
I am beginning the second year of the PhD. My original title is changing, so I won't bother with that, but it revolves around the issues of irreversibility, heterogeneity, and incommensurability in the making of sense. I am more and more thinking that if one thinks of sense away from representation, rather than ontology, one should think performance, or language games with Wittgenstein, or economies that are only internal. And I think that this has a lot to do with making art, but also with making sense in general. And I am stealing a lot of ideas from science. without knowing how.
And which science?
Complexity theory, mostly, some generic physics, I must say. And when I say generics, because it's very problematic how I use it, I discover. So
Yes.
that's my next problem to solve.
And will you be looking at alchemy at all?
No, I didn't think, no matter, just didn't occur to me.
Might want to do, 19th century. Anyway, good. Any questions for Mattia? Excellent.
Hello, my name is Oscar. I'm not studying here. I was invited by Johnny. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well,
You should be studying here.
my interest in photography was changing all the time. At the beginning, I was interested in identity, and then how it's impossible to really portray anyone and truthfulness of photography. And then I realized that it's obvious, it's impossible to portray anything at all, or the truth. So now I'm into the limits of the language, the photography language, and how to, where are they then?
And where are you from?
I'm from Spain,
And where in Spain? Big country.
north, in the north.
Okay, and where in the north?
Asturias.
Okay.
I usually don't start saying Asturias because no one knows it, but it's Asturias.
Does anybody know it?
No.
Okay. Okay, now we do. Now we do. Thank you.
My name's Jacqueline. I submitted my PhD in the summer. I'm going with titles. My title was Writing / Painting, semicolon, Ectoplasm, Feminine and Difference in the Making. And basically I looked at Ectoplasm Feminine, which is a textual system of signification that challenges allocentric structures in language and
Say it to them, not to me.
ways, because I'm looking at the thing.
I know, don't do
Ways
that.
that can be reconceptualized in abstract painting. And I suppose the double forward slash is a way of rethinking binary positions, so it's not one or the other, but that can be troubled with multiple spaces in between and midst
And when's your Viva?
So I won't say a date 'cause it's
Okay, it's soon,
Vibes.
everybody. Okay, we're gonna keep our fingers crossed, toes, everything. Good. Any questions for Jacqueline? No, good.
Hi, I'm Kate Katafish. I set up the drama degree at Newman University, and I'm becoming very interested in performance philosophy, which is what I'm doing here. My PhD I finished a couple of years ago, and it was on the dramatist Edward Bond and Jacques Lacan. And I've become really interested in Heidegger because I think Lacan rips him off, actually.
Yes! Sorry. Yes. Mhm.
So I want to write an article about that, but that's a way
What,
down the line.
plagiarism in academia?
No.
Which I think, you just always wonder why people that go further, when they get further up the food chain in philosophy or anywhere else, they tend not to do any footnotes. I find that deeply annoying. Just want to mention that. So, yes, anyway, any questions for Kate? No? Okay.
I'm Dane. I finished my MA a few weeks back. My research focuses on ideas of how technology creates environments and fields and how it builds up experiences in a different way to traditional structures, moving away from traditional structures of logic, going via the work of Gödel, but subsequently Hofstadter, and my work.
So uncertainty principles.
Yes.
Okay.
And how things start to become a sort of a bit of a game at sort of the microscopic level. There's some point where things start to sort of break down and structure need to be sort of reassembled or reimagined, as it were. My work is mostly video installation based with a mixture of text, sound, which mainly plays on the idea of how to sequence things and how time is constructed as a technology in digital mediums.
Do you know the work of Lee Smolin? Okay, you should know the work of Lee Smolin, S-M-O-L-I-N. He has a new book, he's got tons of books out, but his newest book is called Time Reborn. And the cover is fantastic. It's got 00:00. And what he does is he's a physicist who's attacking certain forms of philosophy that get rid of temporality. And at the same time, he's attacking those metaphysicians who see temporality as infinite. So it sounds like it would speak to what you're working on. It's very accessible, Amazon. Good. Any questions for Dane? Okay, I want this to be more lively by the time we get to it. Okay, okay.
I'm Andrew. I'm the Whitley
You're
Fellow.
not quite sitting at the table, Andrew.
I know, it's because I'm for a chair that's got a back that's kind of in
Wrong.
proportion to me.
Oh, I see.
These ones I kind of bend over the back and then I
Yeah,
worry
yeah.
I'm going to fall off halfway
Yeah.
through.
Okay, that doesn't explain the table thing, but anyway. It's quite an interesting remark.
It's the important information. There's enough
yeah.
of a gap, you know.
Okay, see.
There's contact.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm the Wheatley Fellow this year. I work between photography and sculpture, and I'm currently researching the idea that photography being a form of art, and specifically looking at agomatophilia.
did you say photography is the porn of art?
Yeah,
Oh, good, okay.
yeah.
I thought you said it was the born of art.
No, porn.
Like as in born mission, born.
Loads of people have said it. I'm not sure who's first. Carl Andre was a big sort of advocate of it. But this idea of agomatophilia, which translates to statue love, the kind of relationship between material and my
So
love
if
for
we
marble.
see you linked to a statue, like in some sort of addictive
Well, it's-
formation, that will be you.
I just kind of I like to touch the heads. I like the smooth heads with the marble kind of busts. That's my kind
And
of.
what does that do? How does that work for you in terms of,
I just like the feel of it.
and does it,
It's like a nice.
this is actually not a therapy session, but I'm just wondering, like, how does it inform your work? Let's put it like that.
Well, I'm kind of interested in the way that the photograph kind of sexes sort of sculpture up and how we kind of relate directly to the image and not necessarily the sculpture, and how this idea of statue love originally was because it was impenetrable, and maybe how that a photograph becomes impenetrable in the same way, so the way that we can't kind of access the original surface and the new surface takes over, and the way we fetishise that, and yeah.
So
It's kind of just a
no, it's
up in
okay.
the air.
So then the question I have is, do you have somewhere in your work remarks, or do you work on the relation between photographing and exhibition, and then that photographing of the exhibition is actually the artwork?
Yeah, I've got some stuff that's like that. Like, I'm interested in how when you have a show, most people edge towards getting good installation shots. And this is a kind of idea of like, get a good installation shot, and then the gallery essentially becomes the sort of stamp of what you've shown at this.
It's like your peer reference.
Yeah, this is like,
yeah.
oh, it's shown at a good space, so this is, you know, but actually the photograph of the installation is more important than the installation itself.
Would you ever say that the photograph is the artwork of the installation, and the installation becomes some sort of something else?
I think historically a lot of things have become, so then there's kind of a whole argument about performance and whether you're kind of performing for the camera or whether the performance is documented and what the role of the document, and how that kind of relates to kind of sculpture historically.
No, we don't want any. Just kidding.
I assume you're busy. I've got a computer, but...
Ugh, I knew this would happen.
What sort of
Can
time
you come back at
free?
4:15 or 4:10?
I'll give it a try. I've got to go to the conservatoire anyway, so...
Okay,
finish
come
early
around
there.
4, we'll be done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cheers.
I've only waited 2 months for that computer to be fixed. Anyway, go on.
I think I was
Are you
finished,
done?
wasn't I?
Okay, were you? Okay. Well done. Any questions for Andrew? No, good.
Hello, Stuart halfway through a part-time fine art MA here. I'm looking at the building that we're in, and at the moment I'm looking at the stairs quite a lot.
Which stairs?
All
of them?
Two, no, the two of the front corners of the building.
And you're not looking at the Harry Potter stairs on the side here?
No, I haven't seen.
That's what they call them. It's not my thing.
Grace mentioned that. I think wasn't it you were talking about that? No, they're just purely.
What draws you to those stairs?
Because they had writing on them, so it's
Oh, really?
giving me a way in.
What type of writing?
It's cast into the riser of the stairs.
Oh, really? What's it say? I'd turn back if I were you.
No, I'm afraid not. No, it's the name of the company that made them.
Ah.
It's, it then begins to make some connections that I'm playing around with. I've got a group tutorial next week. I'm going to put some work in. It's based on the stairs.
Ah, good.
Literally, as well as conception.
Okay. Any questions for Stuart? Good.
I'm Gregory Dunn, or Greg for short. I took a note from Gavin Wade, who said things some notes. So
Okay.
no card. I'm an AHL funded student, just about to start my PhD tomorrow.
HRC.
Until I've just finished my MA in Fine Art here. The title of mine is called The Value of Protected Landscapes to Contemporary Society, Readings, Responses, Associated Meaning and the Iconography of the Wye Valley Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. It's a collaborative PhD. And
What does that mean for people that don't
it's a
know?
collaboration with the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty organisation, which is a non-profit making organisation that runs that part of the world. There's an awful lot of art history that's happened there since 1750 something, when Reverend William Gilpin went down the river for the first time and came up with the idea of the picturesque, or the rules for the picturesque.
The rules for the
The rules
picturesque.
for the picturesque.
Okay. What are those rules? Must be pretty. No,
I'm
sorry.
getting there.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
But it's basically
It's your first day. I realized that was
yeah,
wrong.
Really. It's really about framing. It's really about framing. And it contrasts really with the sublime, really, and about sublime, or Edmund Burke's sublime being more about terror, and this being more about pleasurable surfaces and so on, and pleasurable to the eye, and what's inside that. And referring to views as scenes and scenic and so on. That's just one aspect of it, really. I mean, I'm going to visit Chepstow this weekend. There's an old building there that was built in 1750 something. Again, on slavemen, on the sugar industry. So that the area has a lot of history to it. But really, that's their end of things. My end of things is I approach things in terms of body and landscape. I'm interested in geomotional approaches to landscape, and I don't mean psychogeography.
Do you mean work like Chris Nold?
No, I don't.
No, okay.
No, I mean my own term, geomotional, which is more bodily responses or bodily embodiment of place, of your own memories, your own bodily memories in place, and the sort of reflection of those memories. It is phenomenological, I guess, to some degree, and that's where my reading has started really with Merleau-Ponty. But I'm sort of in quite unknown territory. It's in some ways, which is good.
Can you tell people what you were doing in Japan?
Yeah, I was there for 3 months as an artist in residence making paper. And that's actually where a lot of this came from, actually. The sort of responses of the work that I was making the paper to moisture in the air and atmosphere. So I'm really interested in the sort of exchange of our bodies with atmospherics and so on. And I saw that, happen. And I saw and felt the landscape ending up in the product that I was making, and saw it in the product that I was making as well. So that's quite profound.
So would some of your work and some of the picturesque environments you're in, would that have something to do with memory and monuments?
For sure.
Yeah.
The iconography that's done is really important. Tintern Abbey was written about by Wordsworth. There was paper making. There was a huge amount of industry down there, and that will come into my work as well. I'm a person from the Severn Valley originally, where there's a lot of industry too. So.
And your supervisor is Richard?
It's Richard Coles. Yeah.
Great.
It's non-practice based as well. It's just art history. Having said that, it'll get in there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Any questions for Greg? No? Okay.
My name is Lauren, and I'm interested in the notion of event, like the work of art as event. I'm not feeling very clear-headed today to speak up my research, but
That's right.
I don't know. Well, over the summer I've really been concentrating on killing myself with Kant, the critique of judgment. I think I said that last week, but basically because I want to work out what Lyotard's saying in the analytic of the sublime. So it's interesting to say that the body, because he talks, his notion of this. He's sort of. I'm quite interested in the step Lyotard's doing from. He's taken something from Kant, but then shifting it. So the notion of the sublime in the Monnery text as well. But I mean, anyway.
Okay. We'll let you off the hook today.
I'm cold. I don't feel well.
That's right. Write it down. I think she has written it down. I think that is what you've got there.
Yes. No. I just had a really full week, and my brain was zapped, and I had to go to bed at 6:15. No, it wasn't 6:15. It was 5. I got the train at 6:15, so I'm suffering.
Okay. All right. Good. In the future, we all must bring Lauren some coffee. It's very important. Okay. Thanks, Lauren. Any questions? No. Let's not have any questions for you today. Okay. Mark.
I'm Mark Walker. Johnny was my supervisor for my PhD, which I got in 2009. I'm a honorary research fellow here. Interesting party. I've been reading lots of Heidegger. My research was on adornments, but it does kind of create a little war in the heavens. And today, as a push, I'd say a really interesting facticity. There's a book by Heidegger called Ontology, Facticity and Existence, which was a series of 13 one-hour lectures that he gave. And yeah,
Quite good, actually.
yeah,
Very
very
good.
interesting.
That just reminds me. Please add whatever books are missing on that darn library list, so I can give it to the librarian. We have.
I've got a couple.
Yeah, just
I have a list at home.
can you make sure that I get them or Grace gets them? But anyway, I get them somehow. And also, that doesn't have to be just books. It can be sound. It can be images. Something. I need. It turns out that there is money, real money, for buying books in the library, and there are very few people here that seem to take advantage of it. As a result, it's wide open. So, kidding. Anyway, any questions for Mark?
What was the book called again that you just said? The
Ontology dash facticity and existence. I think it is, or experience or something.
That's enough to buy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. You're not going to read from your thing, are you?
No, it's just a name.
Oh, it's just your name.
Name of the things.
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
My name Natalia Roshan. I'm just starting, well, I will start.
That's right. Sorry.
A PhD. I'm from field of fashion design, and my working title is Unseen Bodies as Cultural Phenomena in Contemporary Fashion. So,
That was it. I'm going to prevent people from reading their titles from now on. I want you to know next time we do this, no reading of titles. That's it. Love. Go on. So what's it about?
I'm going to research and methods. Well, I'm going to link philosophy and fashion, and as a result, it should be displayed as curatorial practice.
All right. So the third element altogether.
Well, yes. The thing is, the philosophy is based. It's needed.
Yeah.
And because these ideas about the unseen body, they have very rich history and unseen space as well. Very rich history in philosophy anyway. And different approach, culturally different approach, not only philosophically but also culturally. And the question on unseen, it's really a huge question. It's as for me during my MA, it's become obvious that this is a medium. It's present in any actually art. So currently I have first article published.
When you say it is in art, you mean philosophy?
No,
No.
anywhere. It's in architecture, in...
No, but
I mean,
what's the it that's present? Is it philosophy that you're calling it?
unseen.
Oh, the unseen. Okay, right,
Unseen.
got it.
Unseen.
Okay.
This is why the philosophy take really huge part of the research. And this is, and because I just want to make it academic.
I see. That's not necessarily a good thing. I said it for love. Just because making something academic, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but what I'm fearful that you mean by that is that it's unreadable.
Yes, this is why actually I want to ask you to send you some sample.
Okay.
Because I found that it's really not really understandable for people who is slightly off the philosophical level.
Yes, that is the problem. Okay, well, we'll get back to that. Any questions for Natalia? Natalia, right?
Where are you from?
Oh, where are you from?
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Where in the Ukraine?
Kiev.
Kiev. And how did you make your way here?
Basically because my husband, he's
And
a
what did he
scientist.
do? He beat with a stick. Follow me.
He's a scientist, and scientist is another way of knowing the world. He's a physicist, and it's...
So there are people in this room
Ukrainian
who may want to meet.
Because of him, we've been living in Japan for 3 years, and he's one of the few who pioneered those nanotechnology things. So they made first ever laser and so on. So I can talk about husband.
That's right. No, yeah, we're not going to talk about the husband. Does the husband have a name?
Alex Roshan.
Alex Roshan. There we go. Yes, he has a name.
And he worked here in Aston University. He's reading engineering.
So we might have to drag him in here to give a little talk about
Yeah,
nanotechnologies, or would that make you feel embarrassed?
No, he's absolutely fine. He's giving lectures.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, it's excellent. Okay. Any questions before we really leap into this? I can take the monster off the table. Okay, there we go. Jacqueline, don't take any notice of the fact that this is sitting on your thesis now. Okay, what we're going to do today is really break into the Groundless book, and with it try and develop a strategy. What I would like to do somewhere in between now and before we finish this seminar today is come up with a game plan for how we're going to proceed for the next, till December. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to go through Groundless Grounds, but obviously that's just a kind of a baby walk. I mean, not that the things in here are easy, but we need to break into the actual work of the stuff. So, but I thought this would be a good intro for everybody, and I hope that it is. So while we're speaking, at some point, if you think that that's the point you want to say, here's what I think should happen with what we're going to do for the next few months, don't hold back. I mean, because one of the things we could do as we start discussing this is you'll realize where the holes are in your knowledge. And that might mean that we have to go in one path where we were going to be going in another path. Maybe it means that we should now all break into Kant and start reading Kant. Maybe it means that we should start reading Heidegger, go to the facticity book. You know, whatever. I mean, I want to figure out what would make the most sense so that you have a secure framework around which you can then, you know, deny it, agree with it, crush it, do whatever you want, but in some way have it feed back into your work. So that's the idea. Okay? Good. All right, so I assume that everybody has read the first couple of chapters. Is that a fair assumption? Look at Andrew. I'm innocent!
I haven't, sorry, I only saw the lecture yesterday. So
Okay. That's right. So a couple of you haven't read it, but most of you have, right? Just lie.
I've read the first one.
That's right. You read the first chapter?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Mm.
Do you remember it?
I just remember reading a bit nonsense and sense and nonsense. That's
Okay.
where I got it.
I'm on page
distracted.
47 and then I've read the summaries.
All right. Very good.
Because I had to stick with my
Your other
literary
plan.
thing. I couldn't leave off there and just jump in, so I had to try and
Yeah, multitasking in philosophy is very difficult. In fact, it's not true that, you know, this insane thing around gender is that women can multitask and men can't, or whatever the story is. I cannot multitask. This does not mean that I'm actually male. You know, it actually means that I can't bear the idea of being distracted. Okay, okay, like that's where I'm coming from. Now, I can sometimes be distracted as opposed to distracted on several levels, but then I go a little bit crazy after a while. Okay, so I just want to mention that. So what is the sort of way in that Braver presents? He basically, which I think he's actually quite a funny writer. I mean, you have to be reading him for a while to get all of his wonderful jokes or be into philosophy for a while. But he begins by saying that the one thing that all philosophers have in common is they're obsessed with themselves. And they're always asking, what is philosophy? So I think is fantastic, which is true. And I think Mark, in one of his lectures he gave last year, was explaining how philosophy is really the only discipline that does interrogate itself in a very specific, it's continually trying to think the limits of itself, which I think is interesting, as opposed to physics is not thinking the limits of itself. Mathematics is not thinking the limits. Art is not thinking the limits. Philosophy just doesn't.
I think that photography is precise about thinking the limit of itself. This is why converging to
Okay, that raised a little bit of passion.
Yeah, I think
Good,
I
well
agree.
done. No, it doesn't. Okay, let's say it does, which sort of. Okay. What I was going to say here is that he begins by saying that, well, first of all, you could say that art is philosophy and philosophy is art, but let's not go there for the time being. Okay. He does say that the problem centers around the Cartesian appropriation of knowledge. And it's there where I want to begin this sort of opening up this little present you have in front of you, this book, which I think is a fun and wonderful little book. Has anybody recently read the first or second meditations in Descartes? Just as an aside, you know, while you're in the bathroom. You did?
18 months ago.
18 months ago, yes.
Same plan,
Yeah, okay. And does having not read it, or just off the top of your head, what do you think is the Cartesian position around which many philosophers either attack or agree? I mean, as Braver puts it in the book, the Cartesian move is people go toward this in order to raise Descartes to the fore and then kill him, basically. So what is the issue with Descartes in the groundless grounds problem? Okay, I'm going to put it slightly differently because that generated no response.
I haven't read the Groundless Grounds yet, obviously, but the people that I've read have had difficulty with it just separating things too cleanly and too clearly.
Okay.
That's just in the reading that I've done.
Okay. Now, so I will suggest that that is a very particular reading of Descartes,
Yeah.
and that Descartes probably wouldn't accept that division. So bad people that you've been reading.
Yeah.
Okay, now, so let me start again. I'll just do a very brief thing about the Cartesian move. We know that he's normally presented as dividing off this thing called the mind from the body. And that becomes this basis for Cartesianism, what's called Cartesianism. But in fact, he's not dividing the body from the mind. So the more you get into the Cartesian move from the point of view of Descartes, or from the point of view of his writing, there's something else that's going on that also is problematic. Okay, and that is that in not separating the body and mind in the way he doesn't separate body and mind. Okay, so I'll try and not do the double negatives here. In other words, in presenting this homogeneous unity, or this heterogeneic unity, heterogeneic meaning that there are obvious distinctions within the unity. So I can talk about body, I can talk about mind, but they're not separatable. So this heterogeneic unity of body, mind, blob is able to be atomized. What he means by that, or what is meant by that, is that you can understand it in its sort of smaller and smaller particles, not nanoparticles, but just like atomistic particles. And here he's following the Newtonian physics, and he's following a very specific kind of mathematical model, or he's reinventing it. So he writes about, for example, in the Meditations, he writes about a thing called the pineal gland. And I'm not sure how many people have ever heard of a pineal gland. A pineal gland, do you know where it's located? No, base of the skull. Mm-hmm. That's right. You got more or less the right part of the body, generally speaking. It is a third eye, but it's located at the base of the skull. And it's considered, as Mark rightly said, the third eye. And what Descartes argues in this thing, in the pineal gland, he says that all sensuousness, anything that is able to inflame the senses, is pictured in the pineal gland. And he goes further and basically says that that picturing can't be removed from the body. That picturing can't be removed from the body. So this pineal gland, which already sounds obscene, I do like the word pineal, the pineal gland that is in the base of your neck, that is where is located your aggressive, wild, erotic, sexually practically depraved positionalities in the world. And he basically tries to say that that senses, so we're not talking about the mind and we're not talking about the body, we're talking about this sexual energy, this sexual vitality, you can find it in this gland. And that if you remove the gland, it's not like you'd be able to then look at it, because you can't remove life, you can't remove this energy from the body. Now, that kind of sounds interesting, actually. And you can see why there are people that absolutely adore this approach, Bataille being one of them. I mean, this notion of the pineal gland that Bataille then rewrites as the pineal eye, and becomes the sort of sexual hunger in the body. He starts talking about this, and it's quite an interesting development. I'm just throwing that out because however you're seeing this, the attack about that from the point of view of, on the one hand, what Braver is sort of dividing into very general camps, the analytic philosophers versus the continental philosophers. The analytic philosophers have difficulties with the Cartesian, that aspect of the Cartesian move, because the compartmentalism, as you were talking about, isn't compartmentalized enough. And so a lot of the compartmentalism that you hear of Descartes is coming from analytic philosophy. Okay, so they have a problem that, you know, they sort of reinterpret the Cartesian move. On the other hand, you have the continental philosophers who may be taking the notion of the Cartesian move as the separation between body and mind, and are then attacking it. But if they then read it, as I've just suggested, this sensuousness that's in the back of the skull, that it still has to do with these segmentarities, these kind of sedimentations of how one comes together to form this unity with the senses. So you sort of have the intellectual reason, you have the physical body, and then you have this sort of gray area of the senses, of this kind of like, I don't know what, intuition, weird stuff, you know, stuff that's not rigorous, stuff that's not academic in that sense, you know, this kind of odd thing. So that is considered an initial way to try and understand how something is given meaning. So how your sexuality is given meaning, how your identity is given meaning, how some meaning gets established, how something becomes sensical as opposed to nonsensical, that it makes sense, that it, in fact it's the making, literally making sense. And in this making of sense, that provides a platform around which a further type of meaning can be established, or let's say a fuller meaning can be established. So to put this slightly differently, and for those of you, some of you were in the class last night, this is a slightly more in-depth move into this comment, but in the Cartesian move that says cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, Descartes raises the question of doubt. And he basically makes the argument that doubt cannot be doubted. That many things can happen. You can doubt your hands. You can doubt the fact that we're actually here. You can doubt the sky, but you can't doubt doubt. Now, just out of curiosity, because this became a huge discussion last night, why can't you doubt doubt? What is it about the inability to doubt doubt? Why can't you just say, no, I doubt doubt? Why is that not possible to go beyond the doubting of doubt?
Well, because we don't know everything, you know, it's impossible.
No, because that notion, so I say that respectfully, it's like, no, I don't mean like that, but, you know, because, I'll just back up slightly. The doubt that, the Cartesian doubt is not the same doubt as the doubting Thomas doubt. And everybody remembers doubting Thomas. Who is Thomas?
St. Thomas.
St. Thomas. And what did St. Thomas doubt?
Well, we didn't trust the resurrection of Christ, therefore to touch the wounds.
And he didn't just touch it. He didn't just sort of hang out and go, yeah, you look like you're real, or I'm going to pinch you. You know, he give a big hug or something like that. No, he put his fingers in the wound. Now, why did that work for him? Why did that alleviate his doubt?
The senses, you know, the sensual reaction.
And who had the sensual reaction?
They both did.
They both did, because can you imagine having someone put their fingers in your wound? It might be a little bit complicated, okay? You know, yeah, ow. Okay, and what did that prove for Thomas?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, it proved the real life of Christ and the resurrection, but
It proved the resurrection of Christ.
But because he found the living body, and the way to find the living body was going through the skin, going to find that it was not an image,
Right,
but it was three-dimensionality interior to it.
right.
And that goes back to the problem of Descartes and all the modern era, because there is the notion of observing deep, which sounds like a paradox. You know, one observes what one sees as the surface, but knowledge as carrying with itself with the other is knowledge of what's inside. So
Close.
Are you saying that it's going to sound really odd saying it, but you have to put your finger inside something for it to be real, more than just the surface.
No,
Touching
not
the
for it
surface
to be
isn't
real,
enough.
to understand it, which is different, to make sense of it.
Well,
so yes, that's probably a better way of putting it. To make sense of it, you've got to be beyond just the surface.
yes, that is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And that is not what Descartes is saying. So that's why we're going to be very clear that we're clear on the doubt that he's not talking about. Sorry about all these double negatives. So he is not, Descartes is not talking about the Thomas doubt, which is that doubt, which is, I don't believe you. I am now going to see if I can prove that this is true. I'm now going to put my hand in the wound and see if you react. Wow, you did react. You slapped me, around the head, and I also felt the gooey bit of your intestines or whatever it is that he was touching, and that's not the doubt he's talking about. So in other words, he's not talking about the difference between certainty and that which is not true, or that which is certainty as truth, as opposed to that which is not true. He's not talking about that form of doubt. So now that we know that he's not talking about that form of doubt, and you're not allowed to answer, Andre, because you were there last night. Stuart, you were there last night? No, that's right, you weren't there last night. Yes, so you could possibly answer.
I doubt it.
Sorry, no, very funny. Okay, good answer. Anybody want to try the other form of doubt? The doubt that forms, the doubt that he says you can't get out of?
Is it almost to do with the title of this book, The Ground? It does.
Yes,
no
it
ground.
does have to do with the title of the book. Good. No, you're right. Thought you meant this book. This moment. No. It does.
I don't know if I'm thinking right, but
A little
is
louder.
it the outside down that's always attached to the anything? As in, it might be the other
So close.
way.
So close.
It's,
Yeah.
what I was saying before was to describe St. Thomas. What I would have answered is that.
I mean, if you hadn't answered what you did answer.
No, because you asked me what St. Thomas doubt was, but my understanding of the Descartes doubt is that it is the doubt about the certainty of the senses one has. So one doesn't doubt to being true and false, but one doubts if one can trust the senses one has. So it's a continuous revolving on itself question, which forms the ground for all knowledge.
Say that again. Say that again.
Is it like with the dialectic?
Don't use that word.
No.
Yeah, no words of dialectics at the moment.
Is it because to doubt makes doubt certain?
Yes.
Yeah, because but there's a point of St. Augustine that says while you doubt, you cannot negate your doubting. So because the point was that it's a complete negative disposition. They say, well, do we exist or is it an hallucination? So
Right.
once you start doubting that, then you cannot doubt that you're doubting. You cannot negate that you're doubting.
So
Because it would
doubt
be
in
proof.
this context would be called a singularity.
Yes.
Just so we're clear about this. So in this very slim version of it, I'm going to put it a different way and see if you can hear this better. And then we're going to go back to what Matthias said, because you're right about the spiral thing, which is also important here. And then we'll go to what he's saying. If I said to you, can you get out of Earth? Can you get off the Earth? What would your answer be? Can you get outside of the Earth? Yes, good. Okay, can you get outside of the galaxy? Yes. Can you get outside of all the galaxies? Ever?
I've got to keep saying yes,
No. The edge of the universe, the whole universe, the absolute, the edge of that universe, what's beyond that edge? Nothing. So you can't, so somewhere you can't go any further. It's creepy. It's like the Escher hands, you can't go outside of that outside. You can only go, you can keep going up to a certain point, but at some point there is no outside.
It has to be.
No.
That isn't.
If it has to be, that's a Newtonian notion of mathematics, doubt, physics, and so on. Because, yes?
But just the fact that there's an outside and inside, that's a certainty. You're saying outside and inside, there's a wall between, there's a line, there's a liminal space
The limits.
between.
Yeah, but there is no outside to the outside.
There is no beyond.
There's no beyond. There just is the is.
Yeah,
It's like with the
yeah,
horizon,
yeah.
it's like flat. We're talking about horizon.
Yeah.
Flat surface thing that doesn't have the.
That whose
There's
edges
nothing
are
else.
only the edges as far as it goes.
Yeah. It cannot go beyond what it
What it is.
itself. Yeah.
What are we talking about then? Are we talking about from the outside that isn't?
Nothing. At best, it can be an abstraction. And what Descartes, you're not agreeing, I can see that. That nod is a small eye.
Doesn't talk about
Has anybody ever seen Burn This? I think it's called Burn This, or I don't know why I ask you people this. Nobody watches anything. They watch films, you know. Nothing. I think it's with Brad Pitt and
Burn After Reading.
Burn After Reading.
Yeah.
You saw it, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember where Brad Pitt does Small Eye, where he's trying to be really?
No, sorry, don't.
Okay, so
That's what
picture
it is.
Brad Pitt as this gym bunny, very gay, kind of in a kind of stereotypic chewing gum, hair standing up, you know, tight little shirt, and he's found this kind of what he perceives to be secret documents, but of course, in fact, it's just somebody's tax accounting. And he and his friend, who's also a gym bunny, the woman wants to have all this different plastic surgery, so she devises a plan to sell this stuff to the U.S. Embassy. They, of course, think she's an idiot. And so she decides that they are traitors, and she goes to the Russian embassy. So it gets quite mad. Anyway, John Malkovich, it's his accounting things that have been stolen. And he's meanwhile having all sorts of problems because he's just been fired from the State Department and so on and so forth. So Brad Pitt calls up Malkovich and basically says, you know, I'm going to try and extort $20,000 or whatever the amount of the surgery cost to get this, you know, plastic surgery from you. And John Malkovich's going, what the fuck? Who the fuck are you? What the fuck? And so they devise them a plan to meet, because John Malkovich cannot believe who this person is who's called him in the middle of the night. And they meet, and Brad Pitt is wearing this kind of suit which he's never worn before, so he looks very awkward. He's chewing his gum, and he's coming next to the car, and he gets into the car and he says, you know, you're going to give me the 20 grand. He goes, who the fuck are you? And Brad Pitt makes little tiny eyes like this. He goes, I am your worst nightmare. And John Malkovich punches him in the nose. And he's like, what? Anyway, I just say that because the small eye bit is the way of showing very quietly strong disagreement. Okay, but we'll let that lie for the time being. Unless you want to continue.
Interrogation, I get.
I know, I'm sorry. But you're welcome to talk about the outside of the outside.
Can I think about it first?
Yes. Okay, so the point here is that if there is, you know, we can say, for example, if you look at this table, there's clearly an off the table outside, but it would be hard to understand what would be. No, I'm not going to give that example because picture the table going on forever. And just the infinite. What if you had an infinite surface? What would be the outside of that infinite surface? There would be none, right? Because and that's what he's calling doubt. The doubt is it's not the not certainty, it's the inability to ever be certain.
Yeah.
Okay? And not because it's a moral position that you should never be certain, but because you can't be. You physically, literally, or whatever the way of putting that is. So that was a conundrum that really irritated a lot of people, one of whom is sitting in the room who shall not be named. Okay? I'm sorry, Mark. It's still an issue today. Yes, 2 of you. Okay? That's right. Another small eye over there. Okay. Now,
green.
okay, large eye. Sorry, whatever. My point is that the Cartesian moment of doubt is complex because it's attractive in a certain sense. Like Einstein had problems with this because he was trying to understand, his argument was that the universe was always expanding. But if it was always expanding, then it would just, I don't know, explode or something. He couldn't understand how to make the argument that it was always exploding, but somehow it wasn't. So he basically, what he called the fudge factor, which I do love. Just, I can't explain it here, we'll use the fudge factor. And the fudge factor was that I can't explain that it's always enlarging like this, so somehow there's got to be what he called cosmological stasis, and therefore you could have an outside. The outside, of course, was a black hole or was the, whatever. But technically or logically or whatever the best way of putting this is, if you take a Cartesian move on this, the question of doubt, the great news about it is that it always opens the condition for having an unsayable something as part of the picture. And that's important. So for some people, some philosophers, some artists, some, anybody who's interested in physicists, we'll call him PAP, philosopher, artist, physicist. Anyway, God, I make jokes to myself. So. I'm so sorry. I haven't slept this week. I mean, that's really the problem. I feel like Lauren. I'm sorry. Now, that allows one to talk about a thing called a ground that is not a hard and fixed ground. Now, why is it important to talk about a ground? Who cares about a ground? What is the thing about a ground? Answer. The answer is complex, but the sort of initial way into this answer is that in order for there to be some form of meaning in an infinite field, so the field is going spreading out and you can't get outside of it, well then how do you make sense of it? Well, the answer has to be that there has to be cuts in there. Either deep cuts or scratches. There have to be some kind of cut. They have to be some kind of liminal or something that creates an edge so that you can create a container around which you can think through a concept or think through something. So otherwise it's just kind of, you just can't, it's just too amorphous. So the doubt thing of Descartes, the good news was that he was able to say that that was the most farthest limit you could possibly get, and that limit was always, well, it wasn't inside or outside, it was just the limit. And that meant that if the limit of the infinite was doubt, then that limit that sort of gave the infinite some kind of way to conceptualize it, that limit, if you sort of turned your vision, so let's say we have this thing going like this, and this is the doubt thing. This is the limit that says that, it's as far out as it goes. That if you looked at it this way, this limit, this thing called doubt, gave, was a non-closed way of creating a barrier around which you could make sense of this rest of it. So this non-closed way of making a barrier, you could call also a surface. But I might be getting too far ahead of myself. Let me just pocket the thing about doubt as a limit, and rethink or circle back to the earlier remark about the pineal eye and the pineal gland and the sensuousness. So in a certain way, those marks within the infinite had to be established. So you have cogito ergo sum. So what comes before or at the edge of cogito ergo sum is doubt. So it really reads, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. And that allows one to have a very specific notion of what it means to be human. The idea that the human was no longer a product of God. Not in the sense, I mean, this was not necessarily a full-on critique against God or theology or religion, but it was a critique against the view that one didn't have free will, or one didn't have choice to become whoever it is they wanted to become. It was a way to break with the usual ways of forming this limit, because if you don't have a limit, remember, you can't make meaning, goes the argument. So this limit was now a flexible limit, a flexi limit. It was a porous limit. And the question was, where does that limit go? Well, it could go at the edge of the infinite, but you could pull it in a little bit. It doesn't have to go there. It doesn't have to go at the very edge, because the doubt can go in different parts of this limiting moment. So you have a skin situation. You have a pineal eye situation that begins to develop a different form of materiality, or a different form of ground, that will reflect back, or will be able to create a way to go forward using that as a guidepost. Translation. So in a lot of you have had this argument or this thing before. You know that in telos, which is a typical form of how something gets grounded, the goal of something comes back around and gives the ground, or the reason, or the purpose for why you do something. So you're fighting for democracy, the concept of democracy comes back around and gives you your direction. You are an oak tree, you know that the growth of an acorn that turns into an oak tree, the oak tree gives meaning to the acornness as it unfolds toward becoming a tree, and so on and so forth. But if doubt is the last part that you get to, and also the first part of the telos, that's a very different way of understanding choice. See, if tree is the end point, if you have an acorn and unfolds and becomes the oak tree, then you know that you have to do X, Y, and Z to make that oak tree happen. But if doubt is the goal, as it were, or is the edge of that thing, and doubt comes back around to give impetus to how you go forward, that's a very different set of criterion to, yes, Kate?
No, I just understood the first chapter a bit better.
Okay, well done. Can you explain what you understood?
No, sorry.
No, sorry. Okay, we'll get there. So, can we move to the next thing? Is everybody at the same point with this? So that, because I don't want to leave anybody behind here.
But just to pick up on Kate's, it's like there are things that just like pinning into all
Yeah,
those bits.
I was just imagining like pinball machine basically.
Yeah.
This surface is
Yes.
a pinball machine, and doubt and all those points that put there, and then let's say thought of we would be a ball, and we won't go beyond. We won't. I don't know why I think about motor. Right now.
You think about a motor, or
the
you think
ethics,
about
killing, like
murder?
Motor, sorry.
I don't know why I think about murder.
It comes to mind, but yeah, especially with the penal eye, as something that kind of the doubt, like bounce you off before you would bounce off most of the people before killing, let's say, committing that.
I think we'll just wait about that one. I think we'll let you just rest on that murder bit. Were you going to comment on murder?
No.
No, okay.
I'm going to come
Let's not comment on more, but let's forget what happened.
Was it the right
I'm going to go there. Oh, I'm going into the scarf now.
That's right. Come back. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
A question.
Wait, Grace, were you going to say something? Oh, sorry.
I'm from memory of reading the text a long time ago. There is
Which text?
The card.
Oh, I thought you meant this text. Yeah.
He speaks of what is become known as the Cartesian mechanicism. To say that in between things there is no void. Everything touches something else in order to transmit information, energy, senses.
Say that again, I don't think people heard you.
So in between things, in between atoms or
Mhm.
bodies, that's a precise word for it, there is no void. Information, energy, anything can be transmitted only if bodies touch each other, which somehow then is what leads to the Newtonian model presented there.
And what is that Newtonian model?
There are atoms and the energy, in a body continues in its state if it isn't interfered with by another body, where it is influenced.
Which means that two things cannot be at the same place at the same time.
There's a law, no contradiction of
Yeah.
the body. And going back to where we started with the card about the problem it faces, deals with the iron split of the senses and the reason, of the mind and the body, that united by this solution it finds, which always sounds to me a bit like a trick, because well, there is a bit in between the links there, but then what is that bit in between the links there?
Right.
It is due to this the point he makes that everything needs to touch everything else in order to communicate. Otherwise, the split between the ability to say, I feel that the fire is hot, and the feeling of the fire being hot on my skin is unrelated. So he's trying to bring it together, but he's not the one that has split the two.
Yeah, that's right.
The problem
So
of the split was already there since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And so you find this other bit then to me was always one bit actually saying, what's inside the finger now? How does it work? It looks like a magic hand mold that doesn't do anything else.
And your question is, how does that, what's inside the pineal gland, basically?
Well, no, the question is not what's inside the pineal gland, but is the card attempting a form of synthesis? Or is just resting on these continuous doubting?
I would say it is a form of synthesis, but I'm saying that very cautiously. Because synthesis might mean many things right now. It's a heterogeneic unity. In that sense, it's a synthesis. But okay, let's just put that. Did you have some question there, Greg? Okay, now let's make sure that we're all together on this. So, you know, in telos, in the logic of the telos, in the teleology, that you start, let's say, with an acorn, and it unfolds, and it becomes the oak tree. And you know that if you feed the acorn properly, it will unfold until it is the tree. So in this sense, it's connected. This unfolding is, completely a connected scenario. So you basically have this situation, which is you start there. Let's say you start there. There you go. Ta-da. There. That's the acorn. And then it unfolds, or let's say you start here. Start here. And it unfolds and eventually becomes the tree. And it's connected. So if you get off the path of creating this tree, a tree will not happen. It will die, something irritating will happen. That's a very specific notion of linear logic. So the logic can look like a spiral, but what makes it linear is not that it's in a line. What makes it linear is that it's connected. That's the linearity of it. So it's all connected. Now that doesn't mean you can't think with linear logic. In fact, a lot of analog logic is based on linearity. So and same with Newtonian physics. A lot of things, if you thought really Newtonian physics was complete garbage, then you had a car crash, it would be an issue because, if you thought, well, two things really can exist at the same place at the same time, and then you crash your car into another one because it happens to be in the same place at the same time, that's a problem. So it's not always the case that Newtonian physics is wrong. It's just, the question is what creates the ground around which meaning gets established. That's what's being asked here. And if you start with the acorn and it unfolds to become the tree, then it's a linear thing. And as I have said on many occasions, that works fine for an acorn, but if you happen to be female and you unfold to become, I don't know, President of the United States or something like that, that's a problem, because that's not where you're supposed to be. Or if you are, you know, an acorn and you turn out to be a Maserati car, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen given that logic. Now, given postmodern arguments, that could happen. And in fact, you could be in two places at the same time, but that's another issue. So again, let's just make sure you get this. So what gives you, so you're all going for your PhD or postdoc scenarios or whatever the thing is. And that one down there is going to be your goal. So you're going on your path, and you get to your goal, and your goal comes back around to give meaning to what you do on that path. So the goal, or the end point, or the limit, comes back around to give meaning to your progress going forward. You're a PhD student, you're a PhD researcher, or whatever the thing is, and that's where you're going, and that comes back around to give everything you do falls into that category. And so that's the way in which a limit forms the ground that allows you to make a purposeful meaning. That this is telos. And this is precisely what is being rejected in this book. Because they're basically making, well, that's even too strong, because it's not precisely what's being rejected in this book. Because what's being rejected is the idea that the limit, which comes back around to form the ground, even if the limit is a limit that is a doubt limit, an uncertainty limit, a limit that isn't really a limit, a skin limit, a porous limit, even if it's any of those kind of limits, the notion that it comes back around to create a path is the problem. So the idea here is, can you have something like a doubt, like a groundless, like a amorphous something, that will create an ability to provide logical impetus, while at the same time not creating a path that is an intractable path. Got it? That's what he's saying in the very, very opening segment. You're needing to leave for your kids. Okay. So, again, are you hearing this, right? Thanks. That's right. Okay.
Is that something to do with where he talks about image? And is the problem that you're...
When you say him, you mean...
Braver.
Braver, okay.
Yeah. That you're assigning an image to that goal.
Oh, yes, that's a very important point, yes.
That you're peeling off, so then the image becomes the goal. It distracts rather than...
Where does he say that? That's a very important point, actually. Fine. Yes. It's in the first chapter. If you can find that exactly, that's exactly right. I meant that is exactly where I knew I was leading to something. To this point, I knew eventually we'd get there.
Is it the description of your explanation?
Yeah, because where he's basically
Page
saying that,
33.
yeah, where people start using this notion of what you picture in your mind is a spatial scenario, right? Now, you said page 33, do you have it?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing.
Everybody can look on it, everybody has a copy? Okay, where's it?
It's the sort of halfway.
What's? Where?
So there's a, is it page 33? Oh, right. Okay.
What page is it?
Is
It is, yeah. This is the PDF.
Oh, right.
The pages are sometimes different.
Okay.
Oh, right,
'Cause I
okay.
thought
Print
they-
it on the PDF, the page number.
Yeah, that's what I thought,
But
yeah.
I didn't.
Okay,
So
so,
that's source of confusion.
What does it start with?
Could be 34.
34?
It's also confusing.
Oh yeah, so it's going back to page 30. It is page 33.
Okay, what paragraph are we talking about?
Yeah, what's to start with?
Wittgenstein's agreement with Heidegger on the
Oh, yeah,
diagnosis.
yeah, okay.
And then,
Okay,
yeah.
so can you read that bit aloud?
Yeah. Where do you want me to go down to? To image?
Well, where you get to making the comment, yeah.
Wittgenstein's agreement with Heidegger on the diagnosis brings them together on the cure as well.
Well, wait, you gotta read it in a way that,
Too quick.
that you mean it. Okay. I mean, I said the other day to read it like you were getting an academy, and this was in the MA class, and one of the students was very excited and read it like, "Ah!" So that was the, well, don't project so much, I mean. Okay. No, just read it. Just read it like you mean it. Like you're trying to make your kids understand what you're saying.
That's shouting.
Sorry.
Since these reconstructions make
Wait, start again.
Okay, sorry, I'm back up. Wittgenstein's agreement with Heidegger on the diagnosis brings them together on the cure as well.
Daddy, what does that mean? No, you have to try it again so that the child can understand what you're saying. Sorry about this.
That's why they don't understand me.
That's right. So you haven't learned how to read aloud, you know? Yeah, go on.
Start again?
Yes.
Yeah. Wittgenstein's agreement with Heidegger on the diagnosis brings them together on the cure as well. Since these reconstructions make us forget what we have always known, we need to restore our memory with careful descriptions of what actually occurred, the fundamental tool of phenomenology. Close attention to what my memory tells me really happened dispels retrospectively raised apparitions. We must do away with all explanation, and description alone must take its place. The problems are solved not by reporting new experience, but by arranging what we have always known. Philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of our language.
And who said that? What does PI stand for? And who wrote that? Okay, go on.
Since we actually understand the relevant subject matter, we don't need explanations or theories, but reminders. This anamnestic method runs through Wittgenstein's later writings. Learning philosophy is really recollecting. We remember that we really used words in this way. Like Dasein's pre-ontological understanding of being, our everyday grammatical proficiency contains all that we need. We simply need to recognise and return to it. Wittgenstein compares our situation to a man desperately trying to get out of a room without realising that an exit lies behind him. He must simply turn around to see that he is not actually locked in at all. One of Heidegger's only two mentions of Wittgenstein refers to this image.
So, is that the image you wanted to talk about?
Yes, I think that was. I think there might have been a bit more somewhere else, but I can't quite. But it was that idea of looking aslant.
Yeah, yes. There is a. I think it's a little bit earlier.
There's something about images and semiotics. Is that
Well,
right?
there's images and spatiality where you.
Okay.
What were you saying?
Or signs.
Oh, on the beginning when he quotes Heidegger and uses those quotes, there is a naming one.
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm trying to find it. So much
Yeah.
with paper.
I thought this was the good,
What page are you on?
obvious bit. Where
Yes,
Page 13.
I think so.
Sorry, Lauren.
I
Bit
think
where-
I'm not sure. Oh, don't worry, you go.
Well, this bit made it very obvious to
What
me.
page are you on?
It's just the page before the bit which he's just read from,
So page 32.
where it's in that quote which begins, "We have easy overlook," but it's the bit where he says, "The past tense meant in the sentence, I meant the man who won the Battle of Austerlitz is part of such a picture, the mind being conceived as a place in which what we remember is kept stored before we express it." So that's an example of us creating this picture, so representation.
Yeah, so you have a picture in the mind.
Well, it's claiming it's where you start to sort of fool yourself by representation and lose sight of this kind of pre-ontological.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like when he says, if you ask somebody what a chair is, they immediately point to the chair and they'll say that's what a chair is, but then if you ask somebody what a thing is, they have an inability to kind of describe it because it's it's not representative.
Yes. Can you elaborate on that? No, but that wasn't very good. That was the first time, Grace.
It goes directly to what we were saying earlier about the car, because there's a problem of the man, or better, I meant the man who won about the fourth as a picture.
Wait, say it again?
The quote that Laura just read.
Yes.
No? The past tense I meant, in the sentence I meant the man who won about the first is part of such a picture. The mind being considered as the place in which in what we remember is kept, stored before expected, not only sets up an inside and outside, but refers directly to the problem of Descartes and how the reason and language is linked to senses and experience. And the picture we have here is precisely the division between inside and outside. Earlier they speak about the homunculus of Locke model, that inside the mind there was almost another person that was working inside the head and looking through the eyes.
Oh yeah, wait, that's the quote. Where is that? That's the thing about it being inside the head and looking outside the eyes. That's exactly the
yes,
one.
I thought.
Yeah.
So I thought in my mind.
I
So
thought in my
that-
mind,
yeah.
and so the thought comes out of the eyes or whatever.
It's a
Does
problem.
anybody know where that? Sorry, before you go on. Is it possible to find that? It's very early on. I didn't mark it myself.
Before we go too far down this path, can I
Yeah.
express some
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. Sure.
First of all, I think the pineal gland you talked about.
The pineal gland, yeah.
I think there's I'm not an expert on this, so I'm going to have a look it up. I think there's something called the insula, which actually does the functions that we've described the pineal gland. So you've got the wrong lump, as it were.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
The other thing, talking about the universe and inside the outside, I was thinking of you in Hegel's logic, who's talking about being and nothing, being slightly sort of having the same denotation but different connotations. So being without determination and nothing, both have the denotation of nothing, but one, the denotation of nothing is nothing. The denotation of something without determination is like a box where you take everything out. So the universe is like the being without the determination. I'm quite happy with that in the sense that, you know, the same as maybe Plato would say, what is justice? You never really get to find out what that is. So nothing in our known universe could be certain, determined. But then, going back to what you said last week, is well, that uncertainty. What about gravity? Is that certain? Jumping out of the window? Then I was thinking of Hume's problem of induction, where he would say that's because the sun rises every day. So does that mean I should be certain or uncertain about jumping out the window? Is this why there's no ground in doubt? Because there is something called gravity which we can be certain about. Is it really a law?
So let's reel that back slightly, because that's a very important question. I think if I can restage it, I think what you're asking, and then we'll go back to if someone can also find the darn eyeball thing. I think what you're asking is, when you have gravity, or when you have Newtonian physics where two cars crash into each other and therefore two cars do in fact, or cannot in fact, occupy, two objects cannot occupy the thing, that seems certain, or no reason to do quote marks, that is certain, and therefore if you doubt that is certain, it makes one stupid, really. I mean, it makes one, what comes to mind immediately is the American right wing, basically, and the way in which they, believe that the world is only 5,000 years old, or whatever the thing is. Now, and so they simply doubt scientific evidence. So what Mark is raising is, then what use is it in it, or why does it, in what way does it help the problem to dilute that notion of certainty with a term like doubt, as we're using it, not the doubting Thomas type, but the limit type, when in fact, if you jump out that window and you don't believe in gravity, you're still going to be killed by that action. That's what you're asking, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have a response?
Well, when you're asking about laws being
Immutable.
yeah, or not, because the thing is laws aren't immutable. It's just that
Or in fact, laws are mutable.
they can change. So they're just, if they seem permanent, it's just a case of them being constant or appearing to be, or things holding them in, processes in place are holding them in that position. But just like on different planets, the gravity is different. If like a planet was to explode, perhaps the gravity would change. So things would. So it's not like absolute. The laws are sort of absolute.
So you go first.
Who's going next?
Okay,
Anthony.
you saying that it's
Okay,
not,
jumps in.
yeah.
Yeah, go on.
But you're saying that it's not certain because it could change, so we just perceive it to be certain because gravity's been here for as long as we know, but then one day gravity could stop. So.
But
it's
what
not certain.
use is it to? There is an immediacy to making this claim around doubt being a limit, and the limit preempts, let's say, the immutable laws of physics, because it does seem like this seems like an urgent change, you know, this groundless ground business. So at the moment, the world hasn't blown up. If you do jump out the window and you don't have some sort of alternative plan in action, like wings or something, you're going to die. Depends on how far out the window you jump. I mean, if it's, 3 feet off the ground, probably not going to hurt you. But if it's a lot higher, it will, et cetera, et cetera. There's a certain kind of logic that one must follow, whether or not, one must adhere to, not because you want to or don't want to, but because that's how it is.
But then the problem with that is that the science
Faster!
apparently is the opposite of doubt. The problem is, how can I be certain of certainty? And that's the problem that to me Descartes really describes for the first time.
Oh, so how
How can
can,
I be certain of certainty?
and how can I be certain of certainty?
Well, that's still the evolving problem. Then he comes up with a solution which to me has never been a solution, which is the pineal gland.
Yeah.
Or a method which I take everything apart, I look inside, I put it back together so I know how it works. That's a bit of platitude in a certain way, but it is the way you pose the question that changes from the way things were addressed or accepted before. But he still has to refer to God as a sort of guarantee that experience will not trick him into an illusion, because God being a positive concept will never trick him, will give senses that give truthful information. So all the answers are quite pinnable, but it is the way he poses the problem that is very important and interesting for us, and this is why 4 centuries later it's still revolving and question.
I think that's very eloquent the way you have phrased that, but it still doesn't quite answer what Mark's objection is, or maybe not objection, but what his concern is, which is what happens when you have to deal with the laws of physics or whatever, and you're making the claim that doubt is the primary feature.
Is there something you could do with the laws that are seemingly universal and constant, that you have to sort of switch around the other way to them, so they become tools for you to use?
Say that again, that's close.
So the laws that you're seemingly constrained by, you have to actually take ownership of and use those laws as tools.
And then what happens?
I haven't got that far yet.
Okay.
You can fly.
Then you can fly.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you jump off, if you go to the window and you're standing on the edge thinking, I'm jumping out the window, you should be thinking, I can fly, and use that. Then you use all the things around you. You create the way.
An airplane.
To make
For
yourself
example.
fly, basically.
Yeah.
And those little elements, then that would be this groundless thing, wouldn't it? That would be
Close.
kind of set.
Close. Not quite, but almost. Yeah. Kate?
I'm really interested in accidents because they kind of trip up ideology. Sort of hitting the pavement is an accident, and Heidegger writes about this.
Yeah, well, hitting the pavement is not such an accident if it
But
seems
if
like.
your ideology tells you and you believe that you're going to fly, then
But that's not really an accident. Is that there's no way that it would make sense that it happens and then it happens, I would think.
It's unexpected. It's what you're not expecting, an accident.
Okay, so the accent then is attached to the logic, but you see, what I want to be careful about is not having 20 different personal logics going on. There is logic, not my logic, your logic, somebody else's logic. There's logic, yeah, Andrew?
Yeah.
Oh, were you gonna say something?
No, I was
Maybe
just
breathe
thinking
in.
ready.
Okay, there's, if you turn to page 19, this might help a little bit to answer what, well, I don't know what it is. It has impurities in the middle of the page. It says here, he's talking about the Tractatus and how Wittgenstein hated it after a while, which I think is quite interesting. In fact, what he doesn't mention, he might mention the footnotes, is that Wittgenstein hated the Tractatus so much that he tried to get the publishers to burn it. All the while, it was being carted around Europe as this great work. And so he just was ill because he realized that he had made a work that he absolutely hated, and he couldn't, and everyone was saying this is a great work, this is a brilliant man, and so on and so forth, and he wanted to get rid of it anyway. So this is about the Tractatus thing, and it says here, I'll read it from the end of 18. Capturing all that can be said lets us limit language from the inside rather than from the outside, which would require us to say the inexpressible and determine language's conditions once and for all, without the possibility or later revision. It is this exhaustive determination that leads to the imperious tone echoing throughout the Tractatus, a book that defines the world in its first sentence and declares, quote, to have found on all essential points the final solution of the problems, unquote, addressed with a truth, quote, unassailable and definitive, Tractatus page 4, in its preface, and closes the door on all further discussions with its final sentence. So then Wittgenstein decides he hates this book. But what goes on here is he says here, and this is what's interesting, the most basic complete unit of language, the elementary proposition, the most basic complete unit of language, the elementary proposition, correlates with the smallest complete unity of reality. This is Descartes, the atom. The most basic complete unit of language, the elementary proposition, correlates with the smallest complete unit of reality, states of affairs. So an elementary proposition is linked to a smallest, what he calls the smallest complete unit or state of affair, like a tiny thing. And that's going to be a picture. You're going to have a picture of this in your mind, or in the way in which you gather together this small complete unity of reality, states of affairs. Second, the law of series, Tractatus page 6, gives us the logical operators which constitute all legitimate ways of connecting elementary propositions. So we know that elementary propositions is the smallest atom of a proposition. Those propositions are connecting states of affairs, small little states of affairs, which leads to feeding 1, the set of all elementary propositions, into 2, the set of all combinatory operations generates in principle, and 3, all possible propositions, that is, language as a whole. So with that, I don't know if this is becoming clear to you or not, but what Wittgenstein says in Tractatus, which he then hates and destroys and spends the rest of his work working against this position, is precisely a updating of the Cartesian move, which is to say that you can link basic elementary propositions with the way in which reality is established, these little component parts of reality, and that once you fill it out, is the entire language game. It gets you to the entire language game. And it's this language game that is based on this very specific notion of a spatial combination that is incorrect. It's not allowing yourself to understand that you are bringing on limits that aren't in fact the correct limits. So he says here, Wittgenstein lays out this overarching strategy when he announces the general form of all propositions. This is in the Tractatus. Quote, suppose that I am given 1, all elementary propositions, then I can simply ask what propositions I can, 2, construct out of them. And there I have 3, all propositions, and that fixes their limits. When propositions fall outside these limits, as many standard philosophical theses do, we can simply discard them as illicit pseudo-propositions, thereby pulling out the semantic rug from under traditional philosophy's feet. This forms the heart of the Tractatus, the crowning achievement of its project, and the target of much of which what became Wittgenstein's later work. Okay, so questions about that. So I want to make sure you understand what you get. Do you get what is happening there? Does it make sense? I mean, so this way in which the doubt, as it were, has these limits. It's really talking about the limits of language, the way this in fact is organized. And these limits of language, which might come maybe a bit further to then explain your hesitancy about this. The limits of language, once you get caught within that way of thinking, you must deal with semantics, you must deal with semiotics, you must deal with these ways in which something is represented. And that will create, well, what do you call pseudo-scientific or elementary propositions that are not, that will force you to reject most of what you can't explain.
But it is because the basic, the most elementary proposition, I think the 4 I.M.,
Yes.
which Descartes bases the certainty of all other forms of knowledge that we follow.
Did you say the 4 a.m.?
I think the 4 I.M.
Oh,
Sorry. On which Descartes bases all the subsequent forms of knowledge, more articulated, wider, bigger, upper floors of the whole edifice. Here for him is the basic unit of language.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that that is implicit in this is that the language is understood as a name for an object, the issue of the proper name.
Yes.
So already when one then thinks of the second law of the 6, all the logical connectors, logical operators.
What page are you on?
But the same page, the same
Okay.
in the living.
Right.
The logical operators, and
Yeah.
therefore when all things that one cannot point at
Mm-hmm.
are already half problematic, one can say, okay, they are in the mind, but then they are in the mind, they are not as real as this piece of matter that is heavy and hard.
He doesn't mean anything negative about that,
Gregory.
Gregory.
So then this is what then leads Wittgenstein to say, first of all, what cannot be spoken of must remain silent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because the line before that in the Tractatus is a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
He says, now that we have explained how language functions, we have to pull up the ladder, as if they have built a house with no door, just windows upstairs. We have to pull up the ladder. So he still needs, after having tried to give a semi-precise account of how everything works in language, he falls trips already in that work. And
Yes, that's
and
that's
the
a good
problem
point.
of the proper name is already implicit in this, which is then what it develops.
And of course, the problem with the proper name is basically the improper name.
Well, first, I think the 4 I.M. would lead to a machine. Now, up to a few decades ago, a machine would never have been considered as something that is as having a soul and thinking and intelligent.
Right.
Yet the machine, on various counts, certainly thinks now. So.
Or has something that could be said to be thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So especially according to Wittgenstein's notion of internal language.
Mm-hmm.
So the name becomes improper immediately.
So, well, if you go down slightly further on this page 19, it says here, perhaps the single most consequential change is his abandonment of the idea that language has a single function. The singularity of this function has been essential to his ability to draw the limits of language in the Tractatus. Once this idea loosened its grip on him, he unleashed repeated and merciless attacks on it for the rest of his life. What doesn't, I mean, not what it says, it's a lot to be said in this piece, but it says here, that Wittgenstein retired from the profession to teach elementary school in a remote Austrian village, an interlude that went rather badly. Does anybody know what happened when he went to this village?
Yeah.
What happened?
He beat the boys and the girls, and they couldn't start beating of the girls. he got hit back or something at one point.
Yeah, he also boxed their ears, which is causing
So
somebody to go
boys,
deaf.
but
I
when
mean,
you get back to the girls, they were a bit put out because they couldn't do that maths.
yeah, and he could not believe how stupid children were. And it just ruined his whole view of life because he was trying to be really, you know, kind of magnanimous, and he was a great philosopher, and he thought I would teach the
Well,
children.
he was being a stupid one.
Well, all right, you know, I'm not suggesting that he
It
was
wasn't
right.
He was trying to teach these problems in the grammar school, not the normal kids. Obviously, there is a wonderful movie by David Jarman on Wittgenstein.
Yes. It is, yeah, it's called
Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein, yes. If you turn to 21, it says here where Wittgenstein clearly then expresses this. He says, actually, I'll start slightly further up. He says, identifying language is one function, which is usually how, even today, people, philosophers, theorists, artists, who are dealing with language, they neither mean language as in French, German, whatever, or mathematics even. They usually mean logic, actually, and that it has a function, a one function. It's a logic of communication, but that's what the thing is. So he says, identifying language as one function had sifted sense from nonsense. But if no essence defines language, then there can be no paternity test for purity of linguistic DNA. What counts as legitimate and what bastardized it, metaphysically speaking, up for grabs, this needs qualification, as we will see in chapter 1. Quote, if proposition was not sharply bounded, sense was not sharply bounded either. Where we say this makes no sense, we always mean this makes nonsense in this particular game. Philosophical Observations, page 66. A single true form impanels a permanent tribunal of logic to pass judgment on all statements. A teeming sea of incommensurable games does not. Instead of an absolute division between games and non-games, there are only different games. That is that is so important that you see that. It's not if you have a bunch of different games, it's not that there's behind that a bunch of non-different games. So it's a complete shift here. A single true form impanels a permanent tribunal of logic to pass judgment on all statements. A teeming sea of incommensurable games does not. Instead of an absolute division between games and non-games, there are only different games. Quote, for me, one calculus is as good as another. If the games are really distinct from each other, then one game is as good, that is, as interesting as the other. None of them is more sublime than any other, unquote. Without the one thing that language essentially does, the doing of language, we have no way to legislate what particular instantiations of language ought to do. Wittgenstein clearly indicates the central error of his early work this way. Quote, I had the mistaken idea that the propositions belong to just one calculus. There seemed to be one fundamental calculus with respect to logic, on which any other calculus could be based. This is the idea which Russell and Frege had, that logic was the foundation of mathematics. The task was to exhibit what is characteristic of this one fundamental calculus, to show what logic is. If one has the idea of a single logic, then one must be able to give one general formula of logic, the general formula of a proposition. I had thought I'd found this formula. The idea that logic gives the general form of a mathematical statement breaks down when one sees there is no such thing as one idea of a proposition or of a logic. One calls lots of things propositions. This messy mass of statements shatters the Tractarian dream of surveying propositions. So I'm not sure what you may be hearing with this, because eventually we'll find the darn thing where he talks about looking out of a head.
I don't know where that is.
Oh, what page?
So 37.
Oh, well done. Okay.
It's just after the inner outer picture.
It's what?
Just after the inner outer picture.
What sentence does it begin? Oh, okay, can you read that?
Similarly of the inside or outside.
No, can you read starting from the inner outer picture?
Oh, right. For Heidegger, our ontological orientation toward presence at hand plays the same role as Wittgenstein's pictures. It seizes our thinking precisely when we consider ourselves to be most faithful to reality or reason, forcing our thoughts down inappropriate lines of interpretation while manufacturing supporting evidence. One particular confusion that both discuss extensively is the picture of the mind as an interior. This simile of inside or outside the mind is pernicious. It is derived from in the head, and we think of ourselves as looking out from our heads and of thinking as something going on in our head. But we then forgot the picture and go on using language derived from it. Similarly, man's spirit was pictured as his breath. Then the picture was forgotten, but the language derived from it retained. We can only safely use such language if we consciously remember the picture when we use it.
What's that saying to you?
I'm probably wrong.
That's a great way to start. I'm going to
hide
prevent
in
you
the
from
scarf.
saying that again.
I'm going to hide in the scarf again.
Okay, come on.
Let me run away. I think to myself, I'm trying to understand it a bit better, and I think I might. But anyway, we mentioned the unraveling. So that is the end for the beginning. That is the end for the beginning. What if we experience the end? What if we have the end? And how did we get to that end? That's the point. I think that's what they make it to. There is infinitive ways of getting to that point. To get to be an acorn tree. Okay.
No, it's possible.
So let's say you're an acorn seed and you grow into an acorn tree. Yeah, that's the kind of the simplest way to get to be an acorn tree.
Oak tree.
Oak tree.
So I'm trying to get in.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
I'm kind of thinking to myself now, if we see the tree, we experience the tree, and then someone we think of that way, for example, but then there is a doubt for that way, which allows us to think aliens came and dropped that tree over there as well, which gives a possibility for that tree to not come from this one way. So there are other ways for the tree to become a tree.
I don't think that that's quite what's being said here.
But I'm like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a tree as well, you know. But I don't know. No.
I'm not. The reason I'm trying to be. I think the question is whether or not, in this case, I don't think it's directly associated to this bit that we're talking about, that it's linked to this path. That in fact, it's basically saying that if you say, I have something inside my head, you could actually make, for example, the argument that I might look this way, but inside I am a man. This is an argument that is not dissimilar to a lot of the political transgendered arguments that are going on today. I must become male or I must become female. I'm transgendering to this because inside me is something.
So is it because it's talked about, by saying inside outside, you're already setting a limit?
Yes.
And yeah, so
and that
you
limit,
need to remove limits
It's more
rather
than a
than...
limit.
it's more, exactly, because it's okay, you have to have a limit to think, but that's not the limit that's going to help you think.
There is a sentence in the paragraph and a half below, the paragraph that starts, under the circumstances, especially in the thin air of philosophical contemplation, pictures metastasize into malignant ideas that take over and structure our thinking about the topic. So this picture of the inside-outside, doesn't matter if it came as the breath that was referred to the soul or I'm thinking in my head, become the dimension of the discourse, what articulated, how it is structured. And then one always thinks along the line of inside-outside, or male-woman, male-female, or only whatever has been set in place the first time. It becomes accepted. And somehow, to me, it started without the strength of a logic, but then becomes a logic just because it has been repeated.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem that
When I keep introducing myself, I keep meaning to train myself to say my name is Lauren, but I keep just like coming out that I'm Lauren, and just keep wanting to reject. But that's like entrainment from this, which is an example. I think it's an example of this sort of like picture in my speech, which now it's I can get rid of a few of those. Just the,
Okay. Well, let's just go back to, now we have a few things on the table here. We start with a common expression, I have a thought in my head. That thought is, come up with a thought in your head. What's the thought in your head right now?
I'm thinking about
What's your thought in your head?
ecstasy, what I can't cause this.
Okay, yeah, and can you, yeah,
Which is the thought that what's out there is in here and what's in here is out there.
mm-hmm.
And there's a movie strip kind of
Relationship
You
to
can't
this.
tell what's inside and what's outside.
Okay. But let's say you were sitting in the class like you're doing right now, and in your head, in your secret little head, you're thinking of something completely else. You're thinking, I don't know, grocery shopping, or, or you have 75 tasks you have to do, and you're thinking of one of them while this is going on. So I have a thought in my head. Now, there is nothing particularly wrong with this phrase, but note, consciously remember that the picture is one of spatial containment. That's the key here. So I have a thought in my head, I'm thinking while I'm talking to you guys that also I've got to finish doing an HRC application, and in my head, I actually can picture the application. And I'm actually thinking about, okay, and then I have this list, and it's going through my head, this kind of thing. Now what's happening here is like, remember that this picture is one of spatial containment. Now that's not necessarily a problem. They're saying one thinks spatially. That's interesting, The problem is that the spatiality of something can be expressed in such a contained way that it creates a false sense of what it is that one is thinking about.
Yeah, because you have all your senses involved, aren't there? Your proprioception, your movement, the skin surface is involved in memory.
Okay, we're getting some.
As a whole, it all informs, but it doesn't just end there necessarily.
It's the way you think. It could be different, depends on the language. If you think in images, or maybe these people who has how do you say, synthesis? No.
Yeah.
They are able to see
Synesthesia,
sounds
yeah.
and these kind of things.
Yeah.
I think the limit of the language is the limit of the way you think.
Okay.
Or you can make the reality inside you. Everything is built. The reality is subjective and is built under your point of view. So you always need a context.
Okay, so the context, this thing called the context, is the spatiality of something.
Yeah.
Okay, that could probably. Dane?
So is it the same in the same way when you have a law, the Newton law or the Einstein law works very well, but under specific circumstances.
Right.
In one point, the Newton law doesn't work anymore, and you need Einstein.
Right.
To explain this order behind these limits. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing else there.
So behind those limits could be other limits.
But we don't know, understand it.
Okay.
Yet.
Is that what you were going to say? What were you going to say? You were about ready to say something.
I was just thinking about how the limit itself doesn't really have a limit. The limit sort of frames something, but that frame still doesn't have a limit itself. I keep on referring back to fractals, how a fractal set has a shape, but it doesn't. Its edges aren't really edges because its edges always unfold as it goes on, as the algorithm feeds itself.
Okay.
So it's like a horizon in the sense of that.
It's always on a surface, but the surface is all, you can go zoom in on the fractal forever, but it's always sort of, you don't actually get any sort of depth. It's not sort of.
Yeah, and it could be otherwise, so the surface could be otherwise, or shape could be otherwise going forward, so it doesn't have to remain the oak tree.
There's all sorts of shapes you can sort of. as you go on.
Can you think without a system?
No, you need a system to think. That's the point. And the system is based in something that is not true.
But the
It's something
system can be-
invented.
System can be rough around
Oh, we're so
edges.
close, so close. So you need a system, correct. You can't think without a system.
The system is based in something that not necessarily is truth.
Well, but then,
That's true.
So, under this point of view,
that's good.
you just need it to start. And in some point it doesn't work anymore.
So any system, like for example, the Foucauldian move is talking about the order of things. You know, for example, the well-known Order of Things book, where he, you know, looks at the back of a dictionary, a Chinese dictionary of the kings, what it means to be a king, and it sort of has, I don't know what, you know, a sheep, a ruler, like a metric ruler, you know, this kind of thing. And anyway, things that you would never think came together to form this thing, and that is the system. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So there's no logic in certain sense that makes it true, but it's true because it's a system.
Exactly.
But it's sort of like the groundless system.
But it's like the groundless system.
Because it's just, you start to go off system because it sounds too grounded.
Yes, yes, exactly. Groundless system.
No, it's impossible.
It's anything that's
because-
mediated, isn't it? Language mediates between things. And mediation kind of
That's like
takes
Lacanianism that's coming in.
I know. Takes you off the ground. So that you're never.
It's not about mediation.
So the signifier. Can
Intake
never,
of breath, sharp intake of breath. Yes,
there are certain things that the signifier can never cover.
yes, one of which is itself. I digress. No, sorry. When you say mediation, what do you mean?
I mean, a symbol substitutes for, a symbolic signifier substitutes for its object. An iconic signifier resembles its object.
But why would that be mediation?
But so the object isn't there.
But that would be
So the
resemblance,
ground is
or that would
gone.
be, representation. Representation, that's not necessarily mediation.
It stands in for something.
Right, that's representation, representing. And you can do it literally by repetition, presenting the present many times, re-presenting it. And stuck together, it means there's a standing in for something, but that doesn't mean it's being mediated. That's a longer discussion, which we'll have.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. No.
Probably there are two ways to understand mediation here, because the word itself is not entirely wrong. If we think of mediation versus something that is immediated,
Not mediated,
not
yeah.
mediated, that is a cohesive, solid, non-articulated.
And what is that?
Well, that's not. You know. it is not, because it would be lacking every sort of possibility of movement for becoming sensible, you know, to make sense, to be said, to be understood, to be traded, to be would become entirely static. Is the old problem of permeable versus replica. So, so
It just
mediation,
throws in, I don't know if you heard that bit,
mediation would be,
permenides versus erato. Anyway.
mediation would be the articulation of that it.
Yes?
And it wouldn't work as a bridge, but as a way of distributing it, as a way of folding it. There are some even between the languages we use for speaking, you know, Italian, German, French, as you mentioned earlier, they're rather close, but another language could go extremely far in the way it organizes syntaxes. And the example of Foucault is about animals. You know, the animals can be distributed, and it's very funny because it distributes animals not in birds, mammals, but in animals that, looking from afar, look like flies. Those that belong to the emperor. Those have just broken the water pitch, something like that. So it's a completely different form of classification that makes, organizes the world in an entirely different way. So I see mediation being more that than
Okay,
bridge.
what do other people say is mediation? Because that's kind of fascinating to me. Does anybody else have a comment about mediation? let's let the mediation moment wait for a second, because it's a much more difficult thing. I want to get to this inner-outer thing again.
Is the paragraph across 33, 37, 38?
Yes.
The one is speaks about the homunculus.
There are things about, yeah, the homunculus, yes. If you look, before we just get to the homunculus, I just lost the thing. Here it is. Yeah, never mind. So let's look at the inner-outer picture again. And where we read this thing about the perniciousness of this inner-outer scenario. Mattia, can you read under certain circumstances? Because I think what's happening here is that people are thinking that that there's an opinion that can change, or there's a perception that can change the circumstance, and that's not what's being said here. So, in other words, I might have my view that yes, I can jump out a window and go up, but that's not going to happen because my opinion's wrong. So, but the question is, what does it mean to really talk about this thing called the context or the circumstance? So go ahead.
Under certain circumstances, especially in the thin air of philosophical contemplation, pictures metastasize into malignant ideas that take over and structure our thinking about a topic. Removed from the firm ground of normal usage, they surreptitiously lure us away from how we talk about thinking to how we talk about one physical object located inside another. So they lure us away from how we talk about thinking to how we talk about one physical object located inside another. Quotations. We aren't able to rid ourselves of the implications of our symbolism. We are led into puzzles by an analogy which irresistibly drags us on. And then here is where the passage is. A wormhole opens up between the heterogeneous region of our language, which is why the phrase "in the mind" has caused more confusion than almost any other in philosophy. It suggests that a homunculus crouching.
And what is a homunculus?
A homunculus would be the
fake.
Yeah, fake. Yeah. But what does it look like? What do you picture in your mind? In your mind, what do you picture? A golem. Yeah. What does a golem look like?
Well, it almost looks like him, but it's not entirely. It's
a creepy. It's like Harry Potter did a great job. Or no, it wasn't Harry Potter. It was something else.
Men in Black. There's that bit with
Men in Black.
driving.
Yeah, but it's
So
also
that's the levers like that.
the homunculus is also a stage of the development of the embryo. I think scientifically it is called.
Anybody know? I don't know that answer. I don't know if that's true. I mean, it may be.
The way I understood it here is something that is more embryonic and primary than the fully blown person.
Okay. Okay, so let's.
It suggests a homunculus crouching inside the dark closet of the skull in Locke's description, peering out to the eyeballs as though a pair of gelatinous.
Oh, this is, we found it finally.
Gelatinous binoculars. We end up talking about thinking in terms and concepts borrowed from spatial locations without realizing that a substitution has occurred.
Can you just reread that again? Oh, yes.
Sorry, so basically, the images we have in our head, they are homunculus of some sort of our own homunculus of what?
That's being assessed critically.
Yeah.
That's like the pineal gland.
Yeah.
That's a Cartesian understanding. In your head, you have the embryonic moment that then grows, but that is not. Let's put it like this: that creates a false ground, or even a wrong ground, something like that. Can you start again? We are led, or whatever, a wormhole.
And a wormhole opens up between heterogeneous regions of our language, which is why the phrase "in our mind" has caused more confusion than almost any other in philosophy. It suggests a homunculus crouching inside the dark closet of the skull in Locke's description, peering out through the eyeballs as through a pair of gelatinous binoculars. We end up talking about thinking in terms of concepts borrowed from spatial location without realizing that a substitution has occurred.
Keep going.
Heidegger also considered this conception of the mind as a closed-off interior, which he lays at Descartes' feet, to be particularly influential and harmful, labeling it a cancer of evil in late in his life. We appear to be a present at hand object. Sorry, we appear to be a present at hand object, res cogitans, thinking thing.
The what is it?
The thinking thinker. With the capacity to think because with the capacity to think because this is what replaces the selfless flow of engaged activity when thematized. This conception then gives rise to problems as unsolvable as they are artificial. I think that the last sentence here is sort of hints toward the direction of
the rest of the book.
Of the rest of the book. So the idea that what Heidegger calls present at hand, what is described earlier, is different than what is present to hand. Present to hand is something that one can hold and touch to. Present at hand is more at the ontological level.
And what does it mean to say ontological level?
It's the level of the reason, the rational level, the level that in this sense would be a code level, the pure language.
Okay.
The level of understanding versus the level of senses.
Close. Anybody else want to give a formal notion of the word onto? It's
logic of being.
Logic of being. Who said that? Okay. Who said that? Sorry.
So I was just coming back to the title of the book then. So this is, you could have an alternative title rather than groundless ground, which should be timed ground. Is it to do with the problem of thinking spatially? Is that what's it?
Why would it be timed ground?
Well, okay.
No, seriously.
Time, but as an opposition.
Of space.
Yeah.
Well, see, that would be that picture that you have, that time is in opposition to space.
That makes it spatial.
Not only does it make it spatial, it makes it point to the fact that you have a very specific paradigm in your head, or wherever in your logic system, that says time is on one hand and space is on the other, and that is precisely what they're criticizing. You know, I would say both Wittgenstein and Lyotard and Heidegger are linking in some way space and time. Even Heidegger rejected his early book, Being in Time, which is usually the only one that people beat with a stick to read.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's each of these philosophers, apart from the fact that they wrote, a major work that everybody loved, they also hated their first major work. So, Heidegger must have also felt annoyed. Could you just sign my copy of Being in Time? No! That's like
so to go back to sort of cliche view of Descartes of a graph, a Cartesian graph, it's the diagonal. It's dealing with the diagonal rather than the separating the axes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be right. Yeah.
I was thinking about that because there's sort of containment and stuff. It almost sort of relates to this, and I think a bit further on it starts to talk about ownership. So is this, and I suppose I'm thinking about that in contrast to Lyotard's notion of dispossession, but also because here he seems to be setting up like they're not really getting to Lyotard's dispossession because it's like as if the answer is phenomenology. So they're sort of they're rejecting the Cartesian of empiricism or archaeology, and then they're sort of pushing forward to phenomenology, but they're not yet getting to Lyotard's dispossession.
Yes, let's bring in anybody else yet on this table.
Well, it's just
you're right.
You're right. Circles they introduced two ontologies
I thought you hated that class.
only as like nomothetic, which was sort of idealism, and then ideographic, which was empiricism and positivism. So
that was last week.
Saturday. So I thought that was a bit. I don't know. I think I said that rather wrong actually. No, nomothetic was the positivism and empiricism, and the ideographic was that was known as phenomenology. But
did
so
you
they
weep?
didn't. So I said that I wanted to, but I tried to put forward Manuel Jolander's ontology, which he sort of calls realist / materialism, but potentially relates to this sort of third move.
And did people like have like the third eye come down and did nobody like what happened?
It didn't. They moved on to the next.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can understand that might be difficult.
But
in
I
that
but I
class.
think this is like in terms of these two, they're kind of rejecting. It seems like he's saying that they sort of rejected a similar move of rejection towards something, but they're not quite getting. It's still kind of in. It's still to do with the sensory in terms of phenomenology.
It's just early days in this book, yeah.
But at the same time, the key is here because he says we appear to be a present at hand object, res cogitans, with the capacity to think because this is what replaces the selfless flow of engaged activity when thematized. Selfless flow is what, especially for Wittgenstein, will come to replace the idea of an essence inside the body, the soul, the reason, that somehow, whether it is the homunculus, whether it is the pineal gland, whether it is something that one can regress to infinity trying to find the last core of understanding. But there will be a core. Instead of what is aiming at, or what it then goes on to describe, is that the only meaning is the mode of exchange of information. As long as the information is accepted and traded, and goes on being accepted and traded, that's all there is to it. So this selfless flow that is that if one wants to have a position is to be opposed to the homunculus.
I think I have one quote of Heidegger, that says it's not literal. When we stare at something really hard, it lies before us as a failure of understanding it anymore. So at one point, we'll give up. Okay, I cannot understand it anymore, but my last thought was that. And
That you can't understand it.
You stay with that, and you create your reality from that.
And do you think that's true?
I think that's true, and it's linked as well with the uncertainty principle.
So let's say you stare at this.
Yes, I saw it, and I say, okay, it's a book, and I picture it as a book.
So
then
I would
read
say,
it.
no, but then I would say you're not really staring at it. Because it's a book, but it has writing on it, for example. And do you,
I cannot read, for example.
let's say you cannot read,
If I
okay.
cannot read,
Well, let's put it like this,
just a
let's try
piece
this
of
one,
paper.
like this. Okay, so if you look at this, you're saying that it's not understandable.
What I'm saying is that you can understand something until one point, not anymore.
So close, but so far yet. Think about it. This is understandable, right?
It was created to be understood.
But it's to create an image and something personal, it's subject.
You're
Very-
referencing
Very
back to
much
Rome.
trouble here. What's this?
You're referencing back, so it could be understood on different levels. So even if you can't read or whatever, you'd be able to begin to describe it.
We did a funny thing last night, which is that we were talking about, doubt, was it? And I asked I asked one of the people sitting in the corner of the room, as far away from the table as possible. And she said, well, look, my English isn't very good, so can I say it? And so I can't speak English very well. I said, well, can you speak? And I can speak Spanish. She said, well, say what you're thinking in Spanish. So she said what she was thinking in Spanish, and then I asked people, what did you hear? Now, sadly, the person I asked, what did you hear, actually could understand Spanish. That was annoying. So that ruined my trick. Okay, but then eventually we got somebody who just took a flying leap at it because I made her say it many times so that we forgot what the translation was. And the people were still able to piece together understandableness out of it. Now, given what you're saying, so it wasn't like there was no understanding. There was an understanding.
I think because there are different levels. There is the rational level, something that you feel, or unconscious, you understand the body language, or you understand something else. You know.
See, that they're criticizing that. They're criticizing this notion of layers, of the inside, the conscious. So, like for example, you've probably not seen Andrew's work yet. Have you seen Andrew's work yet? I'm going to use you as an example. So sorry. If you go to the Birmingham Library, there's this show up on photography, basically, and yours is the only stuff in there that actually is odd. I mean, they're all sort of odd, but I mean, most of them look like what you think a picture should be about, a photograph should be. His is like, you know, there's a piece of it. You saw him, right? Okay, what did you make of that? Pretend he's not here. Would you, you know, can you tell people what you saw? Like,
Which one was the
No, don't, just, his didn't have anything to do with an actual resemblance of an actual object as such. Like, you know, it wasn't a building, it wasn't a person.
Okay, I know.
Okay.
Which one.
Okay, right. Can you say what did they mean to you? Did you like them?
Yes, I like it.
You like them, okay, good. Okay, and what was it that spoke to you? I'm thinking that you liked it because it said something to you, or it moved you in some way, or you had some sort of relationship to it.
I think it was the relationship between the forms and the space and the shadows. What caught my eye.
Okay, so the form within the picture,
Yeah.
or the forms between the pictures? The form within the picture.
Within the
So you're
picture.
looking at the picture,
Yeah.
and the form within the picture said what to you?
It's difficult to say, you know, it's because of that I think it's art. Because you can explain it easily. You
Right.
just understand it in an unconscious way. You know.
Okay, Jakob?
I'm kind of thinking, because we make sense of that anyway,
Yes.
and there's this, we aren't able to rid ourselves out of the implication of our symbolism, as our symbolism. We learn some sort of language, and we read that because we learn that language in the way we know that language. So we read that because there is language we have implemented in some way.
Good,
In
good,
that
good.
form.
Yes,
So
okay,
we can get some understanding for that,
right.
not necessarily the one that was intended.
So the difference between Andrew's, let's say, one of the images, let's say it's a curved piece of something, and ectoplasm. So how would you read an a picture with, you know, a woman's head? I remember one of them was a woman's head with this kind of goo coming out of it, looked like sort of mercurial moment. How do you read that?
How do I read it?
Yeah.
Well,
They're all liars.
no. I think you read everything from a reference point because it's from a common. I think you have to have a common level that everybody has an understanding of, so that you can communicate.
Okay.
Is that what they're critiquing? Because
Yes.
that's what I don't understand.
That is what they're critiquing. That is exactly it. So a different way of putting this is that Andrew's images either refuse or try to refuse to be taken as a symbol of something. Is that right?
Yeah,
More or
that's
less? Yeah, and hence you're interested in the way in which the touching, the tactility of it makes the sense of it.
Yep.
And so they call out to be touched, but because you're basically a sadist, you're not allowing people to touch it because it's a photograph, it's not an actual thing, and blah, blah, blah. So you call it to be touched, but it can't be touched, so you can only have a partial understanding of it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Whereas in the images that you're looking at, the way in which those images present themselves as though there is an actual story there. You just got to decipher what that story is. And
So it's the difference between representation and non-representation.
yeah, but that's a big difference. So, okay.
That's what I was saying, isn't it? Representation and non-representation.
Were you saying that?
Was
I
talking about
didn't realize that. I'm
representation.
sorry.
The types of sign.
No. I think. Okay. Can you elaborate what you mean by? Not so much that you Grace are using the arguments of representation, but the way in which that photograph calls itself to you.
I don't know if I can describe it. But the way I see representation is it is a common thing, or it uses common traits that everybody can understand. So there is always an element of sense there that is a communal element of sense.
Good.
Whereas with non-representational, it's more open in the way that it can be interpreted. I don't want to say that. That's
Or made sense of.
Yeah, there is alternative methods to get into a sense. So everybody could see it or interpret it in a different way, because it's not just representing something, it is something different.
Except it's not that there can be lots of different interpretations. There may not only be. This is your
We're
thesis.
talking about figurative and non-figurative.
Sort of. Okay.
No,
Your
that's
time.
different.
Yeah. Your turn now, Jacqueline, to now summarize your thesis in one sentence on the major significant. No, I'm just kidding. So what is your thesis? What does it mean to talk about what you were writing? 'Cause
I
this is-
think what you were trying to say about signifiers and signifieds is with when things with representation, they kind of cohere so that you can make sense of things, and with a representational image you can read referentials, or you can recognise some things where you can piece together a narrative. When something's non-representational, it's sort of like when somebody speaks in Spanish but no one can understand Spanish, you piece together things differently because there's no coherence between signifieds and signifiers. There's a disjunction in the way, so that the way they make sense is a different type of making sense of them.
And is there a winning way of understanding something when it's not allowing itself to be made sense of? Like, or do we have, like, for 100 people looking at something that is non-representational, there are 120 different ways to read it?
I think it's endless because it can be about, it's not as clear-cut anyway, I think, about being representational and non-representational, but it could also be affect, how you say about sense and how it affects you, but it could also be about subjective experiences and how maybe that a personal experience thinks something visually or aesthetic.
So you can
It
have,
could be,
like,
if you listen to a language, a bit like somebody said the best way to read Pablo Neruda is when you don't understand, you don't have a translation of his poetry, but you just hear the language speak. But you don't have, if you don't understand the language, you don't have a referential to make sense of it. So that the way that that's interpreted or made sense of is through not making sense of it, and there's no one way to make sense of it. That's an potentially infinite thing.
So you can have like a zillion different.
Yeah, and if you start to say
readings.
you can make sense of it, then it becomes an orthodoxy of how to make sense of something, which contradicts that it has no nonsense, if that makes
sense.
sense.
Well, okay. I hope everyone knows who Pablo Neruda is.
Just a
He's a fantastic poet. Yeah.
Like linking what Jacqueline just said to the photograph of Andrew, I hope I didn't get it wrong. It's also the big photograph of the black and white big photograph, which I think is a very, very good photograph. Now that photograph is
Just
not,
leave now.
I liked it a lot, much more than everything else, because it's not referring to the subject photographed. You play with the surface of the marble, making it luminescent and almost soft, and the harshness of the concrete on the background. Now that does not represent any meaning. That's a tension that is in the image.
It's sensorial.
I don't want to define all sensorial because I don't think that this distinction exists in this case. It is not no representation. It just does not play along the rules of representation as in language, the straight calling of word to object. You look at it and you notice these, and then you look at it again and you keep working on this visual, and then you think about it, or feel it, and it's even thinking out other people give us different representation. No, other people might come up with one, or it doesn't matter because it doesn't fit inside the proper name rule. And this is why it is very important for art, this problem that they are raising for in this case,
So in other words, it's not so much that there can be a lot of different interpretations, or there can only be one interpretation.
It's a question that doesn't apply.
It's a question that doesn't apply. That's crucial. That's what it is. And so if it doesn't apply, then it's kind of like, I feel like, then so what? So the so what crowd, the so what devil's advocate. So what? So what are we gonna make of it then?
You can react to it, but you can speak of it.
So would we call this reactive art or something?
No, it's this is what
I'm sorry, I'm being horrible.
No, it's fine. it's what is our art functions. So it throws out something that is not solved, is not addressed. And when it's at its best, it just spins out and generates more situations that are not addressed and are not solved. That keeps us alive.
Okay, so, but you would like to make a claim that what you're doing on some level is feminist.
No.
That you would like to make that claim? No,
What,
that
what
you.
she's doing?
Yeah, no, not what Jacqueline's doing, but you're doing.
Oh, what I'm doing? Yes, it's complicated though, because I work on indices, which are signs which don't substitute at all, but they depend on physical contiguity.
Because part of the problem, the reason I'm addressing this, is that part of the problem is that where do ethics go? Where does morals go when, if art is such a liberatory force, which certainly a lot of people do claim that this is, it is the basis of freedom, free thinking, the will, whatever, all these different wonderful aspects of art. And if it neither has a zillion positions nor has one, how does one then understand right and wrong, or good and bad art, or any of that kind of thing? Or does that just simply not apply? There's no such thing as bad art. Which I know, if you guys say that there's no such thing as bad art, I'm not allowing this seminar to go on. Because everyone thinks their art is great art, or reasonably okay, and the other person who got into the gallery may not be so good. You might be very disappointed.
Are you going into aesthetics here a bit? Because it's a bit like you can't articulate how, what something is or how you interpret it, but it doesn't mean anything goes as such. Just
right, good.
Just because you can't explain something doesn't mean you can put anything in the gallery, and that makes it okay because we can't explain.
Well done.
So
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yay, hurrah. Okay, so that's great. So we got there in the end. So that, it's not that anything can go, and it's not that only one thing makes sense. So how do you know when you got it right, as it were, when it does make sense to put that on the wall? I mean, you could look at some of these kind of works, like the one with a little, shadow or something, go, I could do that. I often hear that in galleries, particularly when you're looking at so-called modern art or abstract art, I could do that. I remember walking around one of the museums in New York with my brother, and he was just horrified the entire time, and in fact he went home and did in fact do a similar piece. And I was like, that is excellent. That's very good. You can do that. You just don't realize that you're an artist. It's like, no, I'm proving that I'm not an artist. It's like you got very upset with this thing. So what makes it?
Has a ground? Or open, groundless ground?
Has a groundless ground. Okay, very close, yes?
I was just going back because all that kind of reminds me of there was the pleasure of the text. Bart talks about this text balls he throws in. He doesn't pinpoint what exactly it is, but he said there is, I don't want to say experience.
The text of bliss, though, that's what
and that gives him that gives him pleasure of reading it. So the same thing I think applies to art basically. But what is that? I kind of.
Yeah, it's difficult.
I think it's the imminence.
The delusion amongst us.
Eminence.
Yes.
Well, for me, this is what we're trying to say. This is the point where I say that's event.
Mm-hmm. So the event is the groundless ground.
I think it seems natural to say their event, but it seems like really that.
Do you say the event or their?
No, you said the event, but I'm trying to train myself to not keep referring. It seems to not quite get at the event the moment we say the event. It seems to be more like
just
get
event.
Nearer to what we're trying to say by using it in a way which refers to it as event.
Mm-hmm. So there's no the to the event.
Yeah.
was only event.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. Now, how are we doing? That was exciting. I found that very exciting. You're making, how's this sounding to you?
So is it not also down to the context though? Like you were saying that somebody can walk into a gallery and say that they could make it and they can replicate it, but it's the idea behind it that makes it make sense in a certain context as well. It's not just something that's reproducible.
Why is it that Duchamp's bloody urinal and the little wheel going around and whatnot, why was that so radical?
Because it wasn't language.
Who said that? Oh, you said that.
I
I thought that you said this.
We're going wasn't a language anymore.
And how come it wasn't language anymore? And therefore, does Grace's charge work with that? Is it the context? Is it the fact that a urinal was stuck inside a gallery, et cetera, and that's what made it work?
I don't mean the gallery, I mean the context of the idea behind it. So not just the fact that it's been put in a gallery,
Right.
but the fact that like you're saying, your brother can recreate something that looks exactly like the piece of art that they've just seen, but he
And
doesn't
the
have the
timing
same.
as well. When it's done.
Yeah,
Is
it
the what?
can be radical or it can be
when
political.
it was done. Not
Yes.
just, it doesn't. It's not the same. Do something. Picasso is a genius because he did it in this time, not now.
Mhm.
So the time is crucial, I think.
Okay, so timing is
Yeah.
interesting.
But it's the counter to the I could do that, and it's you didn't.
You didn't exactly.
Yeah.
But is
Some,
this what the
somebody.
Now it's too late.
Is this what, am I going out on a limb here, is this what the groundless ground is? That this is why abstract art has such a hard time, is that people can go into a gallery, or non-representational art, people go into a gallery, and because they don't understand it or they can't, I'm talking about anybody, someone from the general public can go into a gallery and they see something, because they don't understand it, they can't link it to a narrative or they can't articulate it, and they say, well, I could do this, but because they don't see what the ground is, or the groundless ground is in it.
Yes.
Because they don't see that. That's why it thinks, oh, I could do that, and
So is it
it's
people?
it's just a drip on the
Yeah.
canvas or whatever.
It's like if you see a book and you cannot read. It's very different your perception. You know, you need to know how to read images and how to read art as well a little bit.
Yes, okay, yes, that's partly
It needs
that.
to have the ground is what makes it.
But what allows you to do the, wait, before you do that, Andrew, what were you gonna say?
No, I've lost it.
Yeah, I thought that I knew there was a very short time that thought was gonna be there, and now it's run away, has it?
The
Okay.
problem that Grace is raising is different than not having the information necessary to recall what one is seeing.
Right.
Is that, and I think that we can call it context, but it brings us back to this point. The idea that there is inside, no matter how deep inside us, something that is the real thing, the real us. The I am Lauren versus my name is Lauren that you mentioned before. And
Second is problematic.
yeah, of course. And if that is allowed to exist, that exists by itself. I don't want to say per se or anything itself, but it exists separated or almost a priori of the rest, and then can face the rest and understand it, take it apart and say it works like this or that way. While rightly Grace says no, this it cannot be. Is the reason inside my head, as to use the proper phrase here, plus the senses that get the information to me, plus all the space around, plus the way I have decided that there is an inside and outside. All that is a distribution that makes sense.
Okay.
So the problem, when you mentioned Duchamp, is great because Duchamp challenged all that distribution by doing something that was without author, was not supposed to be an art piece, was already made by somebody else, and then he signed it, which was the only thing that made it art according to the coding of the time.
Well, okay, we have, let's say, 4 pieces, or 5 pieces. One by Martin Van Volsen, one by, I think his name is Thomas O'Neill, one by Sheena Calvert, one by someone whose name I don't know, and one by John Thompson. Okay, so we'll just look at these 5 pieces. Are any of them, and we could even have the Golden Lamb, if you want to look at that one as well, are any of these pieces art? or any of these pieces is not art? Because I can tell you that Martin Van Volsen's piece over here, for the longest time, his work doing this kind of, you know, building of the image with one camera moving around himself, as opposed to having the image move, and that's one shot on a thing, was absolutely derided and considered not art. And to this day, a lot of people consider that absolutely not art, and that Martin is not an artist. He's just doing technologically interesting things with film.
But it's framed. It belongs.
So it makes it.
No,
Surely
but
everyone's how
go
you choose
on.
to perceive it.
Yeah.
So I would choose to perceive that as art, but I don't know the context of how it was made, and it's in a frame. And if it was in a gallery or somewhere
Yeah.
else, then
Is that piece, that photograph there, art?
I don't want to judge some of the person who made it here.
No, the
To
person
me, it looks
is not
like,
here.
to me, it looks like something you buy in IKEA.
So it's not art.
Well, that,
Does it matter if
but
it
that
looks
is
like
because
something
it's
that you
leaning
buy
against a
in?
whiteboard. If that was in an
Yeah.
art gallery, then
But can't we
It's
use
been
your
presented
argument you
as-
said earlier back at you and say, oh, you just don't understand it?
you could, yeah. Well,
But surely that makes the problem with this notion of what is understanding.
Yes.
When you have like the one person, multiple understanding, is it really one or many? What is this word understanding? And this is what-
Isn't,
Yes.
yeah, when you talk about understanding, isn't somebody saying, I could do that, just their understanding of the work? It might not be the right understanding, but that's just how they understand it. It might not get there.
Because Heidegger's going to stick this into a disclosive
Yes.
understanding, into a discursive function. He's going to say exclusive function, attunement, understanding, and discourse. And this is going to come out of some other structures. He's going to talk about facticity, existence, and thrones. So, you know, these are things within things, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Words within language.
But for example, the golden lamb, I mean, I can assure you that I could not do that, okay? I would like to think I could make something interesting, but I have no idea how to use bronze. I have no idea how to cast. I don't know if I didn't have an idea how to do just the basics, it would still come out looking anything reasonable. There's something about form and function that's going on there that works. You know, there's a certain kind of technique that's going on, there's a certain kind of skill involved, you know. And so I think what I hear Jacqueline saying is that one, it's not obvious what the skill is, and therefore you get an IKEA.
it's there's different things that coalesce in it. Like it just from here, it looks like, you know, when people print stuff on a really cheap canvas and it's stretched over something, but that's because I'm not.
Well, I think it's the way you said it's the choice when you say that I choose, because it's like if I'm interested in an acousmatic experience, a sound, say, there's a difference between, say, the sound of the train on the rhythm of the train on the tracks and the difference between the sound of the train on the tracks and the rhythm of the train. You know, one's is a kind of like lent towards as kind of rhythmic understanding, and it furthers an acousmatic and it points further to our interest in other acousmatic events. If this post-modern acousmatic event, you know, doesn't really point to in other interests in other acousmatic events, I don't bother with it. That's a different channel. So I think there is a kind of Kierkegaardian existential choice that you pointed out there, and I think that is correct.
Okay, so
Andrew? I kind of feel like you're asking if we think it's art is another way of just saying, do you think it's good art?
Yeah, I had the same
Because,
question. It's
yeah.
not art.
Because really some people think it's art, and even like IKEA art, it's called art.
It's not preference if I just don't like, you know.
And actually, yeah, I'd probably say, I just don't probably like any of it. So in that sense, that I'll say, well, it's not really art to me because I don't like it, but it doesn't mean it's not art. Just my, I don't
So
know.
then, is everything then art?
Well, clearly not everything's art.
Well,
It has the potential.
Yeah.
okay.
I think that the issue of the frame, although pushed a bit, it's quite interesting because what I do recently that I was putting on practice regularly because I'm studying is keeping a frame in my head and place it upon things and make me think of something. And that to me makes art.
So
I think
you have a frame, and you can look at this, and then you can see that it's art.
No, because that stands out as art itself. I find things around.
But I think the frame becomes potentially an issue of the way people perceive art because, you know, you've got a family photo in a frame, and by putting something in a frame and it doesn't make something art, it's simply a
Just a way to call pay
Yeah.
attention.
It's-
So it's
yeah.
a loaded frame in the
Yeah,
language.
that's precisely the point.
Simply
As
practical
soon
to
as you
hang it
pay
on the wall.
attention, then you notice if it does or it doesn't make you think of something. If it does or doesn't further more links with what Mark just said about the acoustic. I can't really repeat the name. You said the
Acousmatic experience.
acousmatic
Yeah,
experience, and then
acoustics.
you
Yeah.
said further more acousmatic experiences.
It's an interest.
So if it is somehow dynamic, if it stimulates you to react in a way or another, either emotionally, rationally, both, or on other layers, doesn't matter, then that's what to me makes art. If it leaves me cold, then we can divide in what is not art or art that to me is bad. But the point is, like, do I get something out of it? We are not talking about beauty, we're not talking about ability and craft, we are not talking about any discipline that has been recognized as art until now. But does it give me something, do I make something out of it? Is there a dynamic relation that goes further? And then I can look around and actually exclude something that is already in a frame and take in something that is not being framed.
Or what about philosophy? Because you might get something out of that. Would you call that art?
Well, I find philosophy a very good poetry at times.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's take this painting here. We have many reactions to this painting, most of which are not good. Now, if I were doing a tutorial, and you all will be doing tutorials, by the way, I just wanted to mention this. In fact, in case you want to be involved with teaching at the undergraduate level or the MA level or something, let me know so I can get you linked to a teacher or another tutor. I have to talk about your CV, it's fine. But anyway, so somebody calls me into their studio. Someone calls you into the studio. Stuart, you're being called into the studio. How are you going to talk about that painting to them? How are you going to help this artist? Give up. Don't give up the day jobs.
I realise I'm on thin ice here because it's been in your room for a while. So
That's right.
I don't know if it's just because it's too big to get out.
Oh dear, I happen to like this one.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant
to say. No, but I'm just curious. How would you deal with that piece? How would you deal with a student that presented this work to you?
You would have the context, though, wouldn't you? You would have their development. If they're if you're putting it in that context of talking to a student.
So you're going to try not to be harsh.
I mean, we talked about Duchamp before,
Yes.
and Fountain.
Yes.
Fountain didn't have a context, did it? It didn't belong to anything. It just said things. And there was in the book Art After Philosophy.
Yeah.
That's what they thought about.
It's
not form of language. It speaks. It says things by its own right. So it has its own autonomical existence.
Yes.
And without anything influencing it or brought behind. It's just fountain. Like it's that. You know, it's not like it's not because I was feeling lonely that night and that's why I couldn't I peed in the bin and I thought, you know.
Actually the fountain.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't have any.
So in short, you're saying it doesn't really matter if that's a student, not a student. It just as you're going into someone's studio. They said, you know, I need you to give me some discussion about the work I'm doing. Would you say give up the day job if you saw that? Or would you say keep the day job?
I'd say just rethink it, maybe.
And what do you find problematic about that piece?
Personally, loads of it.
But pick one thing.
Well, maybe it's just my dislike towards glitter. I don't know. That's probably like one. It doesn't seem to reference. It's my personal interest in art history, but I feel like it's like a primary school kid's just done a really big painting.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I'd say that this is really interesting because it's dealing with sort of fractal patterns. So we're sort of moving away from representation, and yet there is a sort of landscape representation. So it's doing something quite odd there. So that would be my way into talking about this, and then talking about sort of complexity and things with the student, find out what interests they have there. And then I think the colour, tonal decisions in the painting as a whole territory is.
Do you not feel like you're adding meaning though? You're adding the meaning to something they've not considered, and actually, you know, they have just kind of done a really.
Surely the whole point about
I don't know, that's just like some kind of pretty flowery picture.
Oh no, yeah, but what I'm saying is, do you
It's
think
a really
they've kind
particular
of...
contour and line. So, like discourses, line and figure, where he's talking about Clay's line and reference to the lote, L-O-T-E. So that would be another way.
But if they're not aware of any of those references and they've not kind of
No,
thought
you're
about that in
sharing
the
and
making...
introducing that to the student, and then it's responding to what they're saying. That's what I.
But surely the whole point of teaching is they might have made this piece of work, which may or may have not resulted from a whole body of experimentation and work. They might not know yet what it is that it is about.
Yeah.
Because people just do, you know, there's like a material ontology of doing things, particularly perhaps at undergraduate level, but there's no contextualisation of things. So then it would be to kind of unpick that and see, like you said, that the images, the intersection of photography and sculpture. Well, you might not know when you made your first photographical sculpture that intersection was a possibility. So that's what you could delve out, regardless of if aesthetically it's not particularly great.
I see it differently. And here I sort of leave aside what one might call theory and bring the artist back in here. This is an image, and I look at it as an image to start with. So I find that there are references to the history of images. There are some elements of naive painting of a century or so ago. There are...
You mean of what's his name? When you say like naive painting?
Well, no, not Gauguin, but also
Gauguin,
with that, but also real, painting done by what would be seen as outsider artists, known Western artists that have picked up the technique of the technology of painting without the knowledge of the history of painting. There are always strong clashing colors, there are different levels of texture. There is a massive element. The shape of that canvas is not the shape of a normal canvas, and is almost a scenography, because it's natural size. I think, and aesthetically, the image in itself, the colors, are not pleasant as, the beauty that I keep in the video to contemplate. But it's very interesting to look at. That means it's a very good piece. Would I have in my living room? Probably not. I don't have a living room to start with. But it makes me think of something. It's a stronger image. While the lamp, that takes probably far more technological knowledge to happen, doesn't go anywhere. It's a decoration.
It's decoration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not when you try and lift it.
That's right. As Mark can attest. Yes.
I feel like we're kind of slipping into personal decisions and personal aesthetics, because, for me,
Yeah, but you might call it personal, but at the same time, what I have listed there are the elements that compose the surface, and the logic of this image. What is happening here? Sorry, I'm really strong about approaching this in these terms. Is that something is flat, something is not. Something is complementary colors that clash with each other, and something tends to be more neutral.
In fact, can you just push it against the wall again, because it's somehow fallen forward? Yes.
Something looks 3D, and this is actually the photography. I couldn't see it because there are photographs cut into this. So there are borrowed images, which you could call ready-made, or you could call just mixing technologies. There is glitter over gold paint or flat. So these are the elements that compose this environment. And that's what you have to use to read it. You don't have to compare it to either Seurat or Monet or anything else. Otherwise, you will always refer to an authority. It would never change anything.
So while you're standing up there, can you in some way explain what we've been reading and how it addresses that work in order to deal with Andrew's criticism that we're all just saying our view?
To what we will, the passage of the homunculus, the little...
The homunculus,
the homunculus, the essence inside the head, which is something that remains the ultimate decision. That's the point, that's the judging position, that's the reference point, and that sets the parameter for everything else. We would still be making sculpture according to the Greek canon, if we would not be able to move away from that. Now, I would not make a painting like this. And I'm not saying it's the best painting ever, but I recognize that it creates an internal economy where things refer to each other and go somewhere.
couldn't you say that about the lamb? You say it's
I
decoration.
don't see it there.
But
That's-
then I think that's the point.
I
You're
think
saying
that the
I
lamb
don't see it.
reflects an image stereotype of a realistic representation that is so devoid of a real interest of representing reality. It's just an image of an image of an image of an image, but not even a postmodern simulacrum. It's flat.
Well, if I saw another sheep like that,
It's a lamb.
a lamb, sorry, another
It's golden.
rose gold, something like that, it's another thing like that. When if I saw something on the same, similar to that, as in, let's say we have another painting of that artist next year, I would know it's this artist. I think that is kind of.
So the fact that that is clearly something that has its own personality in there.
But does that look like art? Because that's what we expect art to look like.
We
Which
are
kind of
missing
goes
the
back to
context
the.
of it as well, aren't we?
Yeah,
But,
like
but
if that was on a
you
plate
can
in
miss
the
the context
gallery.
of art. I mean, this is.
Oh yeah, no.
No. I mean, in other words, usually you're as an artist, one is not necessarily present when their work is being, let's say, exhibited wherever it's being exhibited, and therefore the artwork has to speak in its way. So the fact that this, because you're all assuming that this is a student that made this, and not someone that's quite famous, because it's an art school and because it's got clashing colors and because it's not hung properly, because the ceiling is too low, but anyway. And that's interesting to me, you know. Whereas, like this piece here, which clearly says, I am an aqua, okay, is in fact a poster, but maybe it is an artwork, I don't know. The upside down feature of John Thompson, that is John Thompson, and he photographed himself with a mask on, with a, chicken wire on his head. And in little tiny letters it says, the cruelty of the classical canon, because he was obviously annoyed at the way in which art history and how to read an image was so prevalent, so he stuck himself upside down in this, and this became a poster for one of his shows. So it's in a frame, so now are we thinking about this as art? I have this thing, is this art? Or is it art when it's doing something else? So those are several different questions on the thing, but the main one that Andrew was getting at was when people start with, I think, blah, 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 or, how do you know that it's not just I think, but this is how you read it?
Yeah.
How is it read that way? How does the painting or the image or the whatever it is require, it is strong enough that that anybody encountering it will be directed to read it a certain way and not another way, not their own way?
This is a very difficult question.
Yes, thank you.
Impossible as well, because we've just proved that everybody does it from their own personal point of view, so it's impossible to say that everybody can be directed. So there's no
I usually
one
We're
way.
we're getting so close, but so far yet, yes.
About advertising. Advertising is made to, it's a kind of, it's not art, but try to communicate insights and the same structures. And it's created to communicate to the mainstream, to everybody. Everybody read it in the same way, straightforward. So I studied advertising just because I was dealing with that question. So
Yeah.
I say, I want to study advertising, just try to make sense of this stuff. If you are able to speak with mainstream, maybe you will have a clear idea how this stuff works.
Well, but I'm going to just restage Grace's question on this. You all are doing a PhD, or mainly. At some point, you're going to be in Jacqueline's case, in her situation, of handing in your thesis, and what you are required in that thesis to do is to present a significant contribution to the field, which isn't your opinion. It's not saying, well, I actually think this, and you just give me a PhD because that's how I think it. It's kind of interesting. It's got to be something that holds beyond your opinion. So
I think it's really important inside. Or try to make art for the rest of the people. Or try to find common bonds between people, or something that really move people.
Okay.
And talk about that.
Slippery
not just
slope, slippery slope.
Talk about
It's
last
not-
time with the
Oh yeah.
I have to
That's
go.
10 minutes fast. That's 10 minutes fast.
Is
But
the
wait, sorry, I did get off on the train. Let me just say something very quickly. At 4:30 today at Parkside, the dean is welcoming all of you yet again. Okay, so if you want anything to drink for free or food, then you go down and be there at 4:30. The other thing is that if you're interested in teaching, I need your CVs. I've mentioned this before, and you actually had some sort of,
You were meant to meet for me to give you my CV.
Yes.
It didn't happen, I don't know.
that's right. Okay, so next week, now that everybody's to Rashaw, could you also read Kant on taste? On the question of taste.
Yeah, hit on that one.
All right.
You're not allowed to come.
That's right. And also chapter 2 of this book.
I'm sure it will
Chapter
not be
2 of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it in the Dropbox?
The thing on taste, no, but the.
I'll find it.
Okay, oh yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Question of taste.
I'm sure I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, great. Try and get the Norman Kemp's translation. Although, what would you think is the better translation on taste? I mean, Norman Kemp Smith, or whatever his name is usually the standard, but there's a new one out. Tell me there's yeah. So you the heck out, okay. I think it's Norman Smith Kemp or Norman Kemp Smith. Oh yeah, Norman Kemp Smith, that's it. It's not in pretty good pure reason, is it?
Pretty sharp.
I think it's in the judge. I think it's in the judge. Yeah, it's yeah. Doesn't know. I think that you guys are not clear on this thing called I think, therefore I'm important and my opinion matters, which it doesn't. Okay, I say that with love. You know, there's one thing to talk about the individual, blah blah blah, and have your opinions. Another thing to actually be right about something that has nothing to do with your opinion. So, and we'll go back to this poor person who later I'll tell you whose that work is. Let's see what you think.
It's one of the problems that we talk about works of art rather than the work of art.
Yes, the work of art and the works of art are also different. But while we're on that subject,
and then that it implies that art then is doubt. An art object's work is doubt.
And who just ran off? Those people have missed a very important aspect of the.
And I'll leave it there.
That's kind of good, Stuart. That's kind of
You just saved it
good.
to the end. You knew
Yeah. Okay, we all doing okay? You like cooking? Okay. Good. See you with the dean. I'll stamp that. Yeah.
Oh, you can stand
Oh,
up.
yes.
Oh, do I? Too.
Anybody that needs a travel 1/3 off, well done. That looks like you were recently released from prison. I like the picture that Mark has on the iCast thing, which looks like you just got out of bed. That, you know, or the shower or something.
That's the effect I was going for.
That's well done, you succeeded. Good, can you just cut that? And can you get Grace to figure out how to do that thing?
I'll do it. No problem.
There's your save. You should have told me a lot earlier, I didn't realize you were so sick.
No, it's just because
You was ready to do
CFAR one. No, PhD, certainly not.
That's easy peasy. But we're gonna meet at 5:30, right? Because I wanna go over what the committee is set up at 9 are. There's one more thing that has to be done. I know, but this is good. There's only be transactions. And you'll like
I've
it.
got the wrong email address.
Yes. Okay. So, Mark, oh, you have to sign it.
Thank you.
Sign it there. What's this?
I'm looking for a place to
Go to,
search for
Oh, yeah, he would go.
No.
what are you trying to go live somewhere?
Yeah, I'm trying to find.
Does anybody have any place for Jakob to live?
I need double room. I have a lot of stuff. For someone who does video work, I have a lot of frames.
Does anybody know where you can live?
I mean, I'm okay till January, but I don't think I will be okay till January.
Anna, she's got a house and she rents out rooms.
Yeah.
She's in,
Oh, but I work in the center. I kind of need to have it somewhere in central. I don't drive because
Oh my God, so many things.
because I crashed the car.
Okay, because you were a Newton, you weren't a Newtonian.
I took a car from my father when I was 16.
It's the
I should know.
30th, no, the first. Yeah, no, the second. Yeah.
Didn't work. I needed a car.
We can stamp it.
Nice having a car, but
Wasn't bad. Wasn't pulling.
You need to redo this.